Chapter 1 I'm a what? It's been a year since she died. A year since the sun of his universe vanished. And he was the one to blame. Though people always told him it wasn't his fault, he had always considered himself to be the one at fault. He has always been able to see spirits. He later understood that it was a spirit that lured him and got his mother killed. But why didn't he see the one killing her? Or rather, why'd he black out immediately after reaching the girl? He then started to believe that whoever was in contact with him would end up dying, with him being the reason. So he shut himself off from his peers, only talking to his family members and no one else. He stopped going to the dojo where he learned karate. He wanted to protect, that's why he kept himself away from the others. Though a common bunch did always get close to him, considering themselves as the hunter and him their prey. Could they help it? No. He was always protected by his friend Tatsuki whenever he was being picked on. But now, she wasn't here. And that's why, ever since he's cut off his connection to her, he grew stronger even if he didn't attend the karate classes. And just now, he got rid of about 4 kids a bit older than him and was on his way home. Though the reason for him getting stronger was his father. Ever since he stopped going to the dojo, his father said he'd be the one to make his son stronger and keep his senses sharp. So just like usual, as soon as he opened the door to his house, his father came at him flying. Welcome home IchiHime. His father came at him with a kick. Ichigo quickly sidestepped and dodged the attack before immediately elbowing the man in the gut. You're improving, my son. Keep it up, his father said as he rubbed his gut. Ichigo just grunted and went to his room. After a moment, he came down and went to the kitchen and started cooking dinner. He checked up on his sisters earlier and found them asleep taking a nap. He decided he'd wake them up when he's done cooking. He took the cooking recipe book and followed each steps. After an hour or two, he was done cooking and took a taste. It was curry and it tasted good, at least to him. He then called out to his dad and went to wake his sisters up. After that they ate dinner and Ichigo was complimented on how good his cooking was. Yuzu, being the one to resemble their mother, immediately demanded that he start teaching her how to cook. He agreed to it and said that he'd teach her only the small and easy steps at first and move on to bigger ones later when she grows up. While Yuzu took after their mother, Karin took after him. It didn't matter to him with who took after who. As long as his family was happy and safe, he'd live with it. After dinner, Yuzu joined him and their father in cleaning the dishes while Karin watched the TV. With 3 pairs of hands, the cleaning was done earlier, and the 3 of them took a breather. Ichigo asked if anyone would go take a bath. When they said they were done, he got up and went to the bath. Later that night, on his bed, Ichigo was thinking about the picture that he drew with his mother. He closed his eyes and imagined him being there with his family enjoying their picnic, and before he knew it he was asleep. Feeling something soft and a bit wet under him, he opened his eyes, but the scene that he was greeted to was not the ceiling of his room. Rather, he was hit with the rays of the sun. He quickly covered his eyes with his arm and pushed himself up to a sitting position. After adjusting to the sudden introduction to the rays of light, he removed his arm and looked at the scenario before him. He was sitting on a soft, lush grass. It was a bit wet from what he could tell and looked to his surroundings. His eyes widened when he saw to his right many skyscrapers and small buildings and houses along with convenience stores and a mall. Then he looked to his far left and saw the forest. In front of him were small flowers and plants. Further ahead he saw a big tree. After a few moments of thinking and observing, he concluded that he was in the place he drew with his mother. Then he would panic if they were in a place they never went to, but Ichigo on the other hand felt safe. The thoughts of his mother hurt him and rain started falling as if the skies were crying in tune to his soul. Don't be upset, Ichigo. A deep voice rang from behind him. He stood up and looked behind him to see a middle-aged man in some kind of black cloak constantly blowing with a pair of shades looking up at the sky. It rains whenever you're upset or sad. And I hate the rain. I'd much prefer bathing in the rays of the sun than be wet. Ichigo clearly heard the man, and despite not knowing him, he felt as if he actually did. And he could tell that the man wasn't hostile, and so he loosened up. Who are you? How do you know me? Where am I? And why? Why do you feel like you know me? The man asked as he craned his neck to look at Ichigo. Ichigo was surprised that the man knew what his question would have been, but nodded nonetheless. It's simple. I'm a part of you, a part of your soul. That's why you feel like you know me. As for where, this place is your inner world or soul. Since you've always treasured this place in your picture that you've drawn, your inner world turned to this. The man finished with a wave of his hand. As for who, my name is Juhabak and I'm the representation of your Quincy powers. Ichigo was confused. His inner world. His soul looks like this. What's an inner world? The man in front of him is a part of him. And what does he mean by Quincy powers? Sensing his confusion, Juhabak sighed and said, Ichigo, follow me. There are more people waiting to meet you. He walked away towards the forest with Ichigo trotting behind him. The trees in the forest varied from small to big, but all of them were beautiful to say the least. He kept following the man and soon heard the sound of rushing water. He was then greeted to the sight of a small blue lake with rocks, hills and trees surrounding it. One of the hills had a waterfall which kept supplying the lake with water. The scene in front of him was in every sense beautiful. It's so beautiful, Ichigo breathed out with a smile. It is, isn't it? A warm feminine voice came from his right. A figure soon came into sight from among the shadows between the trees. It was a young lady who was a bit younger than his mother and was a drop-dead gorgeous woman with a well-endowed figure that many would kill to get. She had long reddish-orange hair tied into a loose ponytail that was brought forward and rested over her left breast. Her eyes were greenish-blue. Her skin was light and fair-toned, and a warm and gentle smile was present on her beautiful face, wearing a blue kimono which had white floral patterns and a full moon-colored orange and red obi. I suppose we're meeting for the first time, aren't we? She asked in a melodious voice that sounded like music to his ears. He blushed a bit and nodded, looking down, not finding confidence in his voice. The lady giggled at him, cutely trying to hide his blush. He was about to ask her a question but was interrupted by another feminine voice. This one was younger and had a light angry touch to it. "About damn time you showed up," the voice exclaimed from atop a tree. The girl dropped down before him and looked at him with a scowl that rivaled his. She had crystalline blue hair and glowing red eyes, wearing a red kimono which had blue flame patterns and a full moon and blue obi. She looked older than him but younger than the other woman. The older woman then hissed at her. "Language. He's still a child." The younger of the two huffed and crossed her arms under her rather well-endowed breasts, which comparatively were smaller than that of the older one. Ichigo looked up at Juha, who nodded at him. He then coughed in his hand and looked at them. "Who are you two?" The younger one looked at her counterpart incredulously and exclaimed, "You didn't tell him who we are. It's his first time meeting us." The blue-haired one shut up and looked at him with a harsh and calculating gaze. Then she nodded to the older one and looked at him. Together they spoke up, "Our name is..." Ichigo looked at the two in confusion. He saw them utter the name, but why didn't he hear it? "Sorry, can you repeat your name again?" The duo sighed and repeated again, but the results were the same. "Great. Our brat of a master can't hear us," the younger one exclaimed. The older one frowned and looked at Ichigo, who was cutely glaring at her counterpart for calling him a brat. "I'm sorry, Ichigo, but it looks like you're not ready to learn our name yet," she said sadly. She then perked up and said, "For now, call me Aka and call her Ao." Ichigo frowned and asked why he wasn't ready to hear their names yet. She said, "You're a Shinigami and we too are Wield Zanpakuto spirits. We're like Juha and are also parts of your soul but represent your Shinigami powers." Ichigo was now severely confused. The old guy says he was his Quincy powers and the female duo says that they're his Zanpakuto, and he was a Shinigami. What does that mean? "It means you're a hybrid, you little wimp," the younger of the duo said. "And not a wimp," Ichigo retaliated back at her. She simply rose her left eyebrow and crossing her arms she said, "Oh really? Then who was the one who started crying like a baby every time he lost to a girl, and had to be calmed down by his mother?" Her harshness even irritated Juha, and he about to protest until a distorted voice spoke up. "You better watch your mouth. You're talking to the king." All of them looked behind to see a masked man in white long full-sleeved coat with black fur on the collar and wrists walk in their direction. He had long white hair and a fearsome black mask with horns protruding from the temples with white markings. "Need I remind you what the king has been going through the last year?" the figure said as it stood beside Ichigo and looked down at him. He didn't want to show himself to his king now, but he just wouldn't tolerate his king being made fun of even if it was a part of his soul. He was expecting his king to be scared, but he didn't expect the response he got from his king. "You look so cool. How'd you get that mask?" Ichigo asked, tugging on his hakama with big eyes full of wonder. "And what's under your mask? Why are you hiding your face?" The white being was a bit surprised at seeing his king look at him with no traces of fear, just pure childish wonder. Like she said, "You'll learn our names and what's underneath the mask when we deem you ready for it." Ichigo frowned and observed the figure from head to toe. "Then can I call you Shiro Nyai for now?" The masked figure nodded before going silent. The first one spoke up. "It's about time you go, Ichigo." Ichigo looked at him in confusion and nodded. When nothing happened, he became embarrassed and asked how he could go. "Will yourself to return and you will. Oh, and also ask your father what Shinigami, Hollows and Quincy's are." Ichigo willed himself to leave and slowly started disappearing into spirit particles. Before he was completely gone, he asked the new member, "Then what do you represent?" The masked figure looked at his king and said, "I represent your hollow powers." And then he was gone. The next morning when Ichigo woke up, he was wondering if what he saw and experienced was a dream or not. His answer came from the back of his mind by Aka confirming that their meeting was indeed true and not some dream. He then got ready for school and went to the kitchen to make breakfast. By the time he was done, the whole family was on the table with Yuzu and Karin all messed up. They ate the breakfast in peace and Ichigo sent the twins to freshen up and get ready for school. When he was sure he and his father were alone, he turned to him with a serious expression and called out to him, "Dad, we need to talk." Ichigo's seriousness caught him off guard a bit. "What is it, son?" His father asked, curious as to what was it that they needed to talk about for him to be so serious. Could it be that his son found out about his powers? No, that shouldn't be possible after what was done after his mother's death. Ichigo didn't meet any Shinigami nor Hollows yet, or Quincy's for that matter. "Tell me." Ichigo began with a scowl, staring right at his father's eyes. "What are you? A Shinigami? Quincy? Hollow? Which one?" Isshin stared at him blankly. So the worst has happened. But how did his son find out? He shook his head and asked, "Where did you hear those?" He decided instead of hiding he'd tell him the truth. Much to his surprise, his son told him about his trip to his inner world, which looked like the picture that he drew with his mother. "Well son, I was a Shinigami." So his son had already met his Zanpakuto spirits. "Really? But what are they? And what are Hollows and Quincy's for that matter? And what do you mean by was?" "Well son, to answer your questions I'll take you to a place where you can learn what they are after your school." Ichigo nodded in acceptance. Just in time his sisters announced that they were ready. The father dropped his children off at their school, and instead of returning to the clinic he went somewhere else, a nearby shop. The father arrived at the shop Urahara Shoten within a few minutes. He knocked on the door 3 times and waited. He was greeted by the shopkeeper himself. My, Isshin. "What brings you here?" Urahara asked. Seeing his serious face, Urahara beckoned him to follow him deeper inside the shop. On the way he asked Tessai to bring them tea. "So, what happened? You seem unusually serious," he asked, sitting down with Isshin opposite to him. "Your plan failed." That was all Isshin said as he looked down at his cup of tea. Urahara hummed and asked, "What makes you say that?" He asked seriously, all his traces of joviality gone. Ichigo visited, or rather was pulled to his inner world and met his Zanpakuto, Quincy, and Hollow spirits. Urahara was shocked. His plan failed. Last year after Masaki's death, Isshin came to him to find a way to seal off Ichigo's rampant Ryatsu. He was given 2 options. One was to use a Kaido seal only to have it broken in time due to emotional bursts. Second was to have the Hagioku stored in him, which would with time absorb all his Raizhi and turn him into a complete human with no spiritual senses. Isshin didn't like either, mostly the second one, but went with it because there was high chance of the Kaido breaking to Ichigo's bursts of rage every day. And the second one did work. Ichigo's Ryatsu has decreased down to half of what it was, but neither thought that it'd backfire after a year. Not to mention the fact that Ichigo's Ryatsu did decrease over the year while Isshin's own was returning. Then there was his Hollow spirit, but by the tone of Ichigo and his story, the Hollow seemed quite protective of his king. There is one thing that I can think of. It's highly likely for the Hagioku to have merged with his soul, making his human body the same as that of his soul. Has he shown any signs of having similar properties as that of a soul? Urahara said after a bit of thinking. At least his objective of destroying the Hagioku was unexpectedly achieved. Isshin thought for a while and said, "He seemed physically more fit, and he actually has more strength than a kid his age should have if I take into consideration that his elbow yesterday did hurt a bit than normal." Urahara hummed and leaned back on his left arm while he held the fan on the other hand. He thought as he stared at the ceiling. What you said does show signs of his soul merging with his human body. In fact, he can even be considered immortal by the next few years or at the end of his teenage years, no thanks to the Hagioku. He sighed as he finished. He was glad that the Hagioku was gone for good, but had a nasty feeling that it'll bite him in the back hard. "What will you do now, Isshin?" Isshin looked up at the shopkeeper and said, "He asked what Shinigami, Quincy's, and Hollows are this morning, and I decided to bring him to you after school to explain." "Still scared of revealing your secrets, Isshin?" came a gruff masculine voice from beside Urahara, making the man jump in shock. The voice belonged to a black cat with golden eyes. Isshin narrowed his eyes at the cat, all the while Urahara complained about scaring him. Isshin said, "I didn't think the time would come so soon. I wanted him to live a normal human life. I'll tell him everything because he even questioned what I am." The cat simply stared at him and licked its paw. "So you do have balls. Good, or I might have had your face gone through plastic surgery." Kisuk, Ichigo might end up wishing to learn how to get a hold on his powers. And since I haven't recovered enough to teach him, I want you, Yoruichi, and Tessai to train him. Can you do that? Isshin asked seriously. Kisuk shifted to his shopkeeper persona and said, My. How can a humble shopkeeper like me train your son? Isshin simply punched him and Yoruichi scratched his face. So cruel. He sobbed and then turned serious. Are you sure, Isshin? Your son will be thrown into a world of blood and gore. Even he might end up finding about your son and make his move. Isshin sighed and nodded. He knew how his son can be stubborn and determined. Ever since he said that his name meant one guardian, Ichigo has been more than determined to protect his family and friends. Damn hero complex. Not that he's one to talk. He did the same thing he knows what his son will end up doing. Protecting. Maybe it's a genetic disease. Probably. He snorted mentally at that. Well then, be sure to bring him after school here then. I'll take care of his school lessons and Zanjutsu. Your Witchy-san will see to his Ho-Ho and Hakuta training. Tessai will see to his Kaido training. Isshin nodded and stood up. He'd go back to his home and wait for his kids' school to end. He'll pick up the twins first and have them looked after by a familiar babysitter while he'd take Ichigo to Urahara. He only wondered if his son Zanpakuto would be a Getsu or not. He sported a grin when he thought of leveling up his attacks. Isshin frowned however when he came to his mind. He had suspicions about the timing of the Hollow's arrival and his selection. His head started to ache with questions and possibilities. He slapped his cheeks and stood up to bring his angels home and call the babysitter. Ichigo came out of his school just in time to see his father leaning against the gate, arms crossed, waiting for him. Shironai gave him an idea, to which a devious grin appeared on his face and dashed at full speed towards his father. Isshin was a bit confused to see a grin appear on his son's face. He was wondering the reason why, though he didn't expect his son to dash towards him and halfway throw the bag at him. He effortlessly caught the bag and was about to ask why he was so excited, and got his answer in the form of his son kicking out his legs, making him fall face first on the ground. Ichigo then proceeded to lock his arms and hold him down into submission. "What's wrong, old man? Age catching up to you or something?" Ichigo laughed, still holding his father down. "You let your guard down and this is the result. Never let your guard down." Finally Isshin was brought back to his senses out of his confusion when he pieced everything together. Devious grin, dashing towards him, throwing the bag at him to use it as a distraction. Kick his legs and hold him in submission. A grin appeared on his face as he struggled to get out of the submission hold his son had on him. A few moments after trying, he was set free and picked up Ichigo on his shoulder like a sack of potatoes and headed towards the shop, all the while laughing. Both ignored the people giving them weird looks. He was glad that his son was finally laughing. He asked how'd he get that idea, and the answer he got surprised him. Shironai gave him the idea to catch him off guard. He had to admit, the Hollow was creative, and he also noticed the increase in Ichigo's strength. Whatever, he'd get his questions answered in the shop. Chapter 2, Welcome to the Family. 2 Tears. It's been 2 years since Ichigo started his training. Thanks to his slowly increasing Ryoryoku reserves, he was able to properly regulate and maintain his Ryatsu, and your witch's teachings and stealth did work wonders. As it is now, should he wish for it, he can become completely invisible to spiritually affected beings. Of course, he took full advantage of the stealth lessons he learnt. He got back at Kisuke and his father for all the pranks that they pulled on him. When they first met, Kisuke performed a full-body checkup on Ichigo and was able to conclude that the Hagioku indeed was gone and his spirit body had probably started merging with his human body as well. As a result, he always had to train in his human body. He's been doing better in school under the tutelage of Kisuke, coming into the top 5, eventually shocking his teachers. There was a condition to his training though. He must be in the top 5 of his class or else he won't be trained. This caused him to study hard whenever he was done with training. Later on, 2 years later at the moment, he can cast Hado and Bakuto up to the 60s without incantation. His growth didn't surprise his teachers that much, considering that he was a hybrid, but he was told that he was a prodigy. His Zanjutsu and Hakuta were impressive, but his Ho-Ho needed a bit of work. As for his Quincy training, Juhabak had been training him on those every weekend nights after he goes to sleep. When he showed progress in Quincy arts during his training, his father gave him the Quincy cross that belonged to his mother. It brought tears to his eyes, but he held them and not willing to show them to the others. Shironai had for now taught him Bala, Sonido and Pesquisa. Siro and Hyro would need a bit of hard work, so he was told that he'd be taught those when he becomes 13, meaning that he'd be learning those next year. By these 2 years he ended up unlocking his Shikai and mastered it to its full potential, which would according to the spirits increase as he trains more in his inner world and with his teachers. When he revealed his Shikai, to say that his father was crazy would be an understatement, not to mention the fact that his Zanpakuto was a Getsu as well, which was of the same category as his father's, a fire elemental Zanpakuto. He was the 3rd Shinigami in history to be a dual wielder. One thing that he learnt was his special ability to use pocket dimensions. Since he can't keep his Zanpakuto hanging with him always, he used the pocket dimension to store the 2 sealed Zanpakuto in it. When he told Kisuke about it, the man shrugged and said he didn't know, but in his mind, it was a different statement. The work of Hagioku. He and his friend Tatsuki had drifted apart, neither bothering to approach the other even though both went to the same school. Everyone was a bit disappointed with his decision, but then he told them about Tatsuki's overflowing pride and her stubbornness. He made his point across by concluding that she'd want to learn as well. That was legit and shut them up. This matter was no longer brought up, for which he was grateful for. Over the 2 years, he'd grown a reputation for himself. The undefeated. That's what thugs and bullies call him now. Add to that, his scowl when they show up makes him a complete delinquent with orange hair. He lost the scowl that he'd gotten used to after his mother's death and often had a blank deadpan and cold look that practically screamed stay away. Though it did backfire on him, as the school has its own fan club with his name. A fan club solely dedicated towards him. There were even a boy or two among the girls, which scared him for his chastity. He sometimes felt like he was being raped by the girls in his class whenever they look at him with a hungry gaze. Heck, even his seniors asked him out, to which he coldly rejected. And much to his shock, they knew he'd reject them, and when asked why they did it nonetheless, they said they wanted him to behave coldly towards them just for the feel of it. He found out they are a bunch of masochists dedicated to him. When he told this to the others back in the shop, Yoruichi burst a gut laughing like crazy, while his father cried about him not willing to give him grandchildren, which acted as ammunition for Urahara to tease him. And now he was on his way home from training, only to be stopped, but not by a group of thugs, but a single black-haired boy. He knew him. This kid was the topper of his class and a Quincy. Kurosaki. The boy greeted him, pushing his glasses up. Ishida. Ichigo replied coldly, that sent chills down said person's spine at how similar the berry was to his father. I see that you're a Shinigami. Why exactly are you here? And so young? The black-haired kid asked. He simply got a blank look from Ichigo and created his bow when said person started laughing. Ichigo stopped laughing and said, "You're right. I am a Shinigami. And yes, I'm young. Does it matter?" he said with a smirk. He exactly knew who Ishida was to him. Since the other boy wasn't aware of this, he didn't bother informing him. HMPH. If so, then be gone. Karakura town doesn't need you, as I alone am enough, Ishida said, pushing his glasses up. Ichigo was getting pissed at this arrogant prick. He sighed and then said, "Make me." Ishida simply pulled the string and launched a risey arrow at Ichigo, fully intending to finish him off. Oh, how wrong he was. Ichigo simply grabbed the arrow and crushed it, shocking Ishida. What is this thing? A Heilig fail. Don't kid with me. Ichigo then looked up at him and said, "Look, pencil, I'm gonna correct you in one thing." Ichigo simply raised his left arm and the moonlight reflected off of the Quincy cross dangling from his wrist. Ishida's eyes widened when he saw the cross. "You see, I'm a Quincy as well." He then created his own bow and pointed at Ishida. Ishida was having a hard time processing the information. A Shinigami with Quincy powers. He then came out of his stupor and asked, "How?" When he asked the question, he wasn't expecting an answer, but he was proven wrong and shocked when he heard his answer. "I'm a human born with natural Quincy and Shinigami powers. My father was a Shinigami captain and my late mother a pure-blood Quincy. This cross belonged to my mother." Feeling a headache approaching fast, Ishida turned and said, "If that is the case, then forgive me." With that, he was gone with a small burst of Hirankyaku. Ishida understood that Kurosaki was far more superior to him if he could crush his Heilig fail like nothing. It was a fight he couldn't win. Ichigo dismissed his bow and headed towards his home, fully intent on learning more of the Quincy arts after falling asleep. Ishida Uryu was stumped. His grandfather told him that he was the last Quincy. Then how is it that there is another Quincy present in the town? He wanted to ask his father, but his father either wasn't aware or wouldn't tell him. He was a bit scared of Kurosaki after the display of power that he showed. Kurosaki crushed his arrow like it was nothing, not to mention the fact that he was a Shinigami Quincy hybrid. It was all confusing to him. But his grandfather always wanted the union of Shinigami and Quincy. Maybe his grandfather can rest easy that his dream has come true. However, that doesn't mean he's willing to forgive the Shinigami for killing his grandfather. He will get revenge, and for that he'll have to grow stronger. But training alone can only do much. Looks like he'll have to ask Kurosaki to train him. But two questions remain. 1. Will his pride allow him to ask Kurosaki for training? 2. Where's the guarantee that Kurosaki would train him, considering the hostility he showed at first? Only time will tell. Ichigo was surprised when the pencil approached him during lunch and asked to talk privately. He complied and went to the roof to satiate his curiosity. He started wondering if he was even awake to begin with when he was asked by the pencil to train him. He pinched his cheek and arm to see if he was dreaming. Then after a short talk with his spirits, he said, "Fine. But you must call me Ichigo and let me call you Uryu." Got it. He cheered mentally when he saw Ishida's dumbstruck look. Uryu on the other hand didn't expect Kurosaki to accept his request so easily. And what was with that proposition? Letting and allowing to be called by first names. He shook his head mentally and decided that he shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. But can I ask, why is it that you want to train and grow strong? Ichigo asked. After a bit of contemplation he said, my grandfather. He was taken by the Shinigami to experiment on him. When the hollows attacked, the Shinigami did nothing and waited till the hollows were done with him. In his weakened state he was struck down by the Shinigami and taken with them. I wish for revenge, that's why I wish to grow stronger. Seeing his determination, Ichigo simply nodded and then sighed. What happens when you're done with the Shinigami? What will you do after that? Uryu didn't have an answer to, but before he could put some thoughts onto the matter, both were distracted by the bell indicating the end of lunch. Meet me every weekend at 4 p.m. near the outskirts of the town. We'll start the training sessions there. See ya. Ichigo finished as he turned and headed towards his class. Finally, after a long time, Uryu allowed himself to smile. 5 months passed since the two agreed to train together. Ichigo had taught him much about the Quincy history and what caused the Shinigami to slaughter them those 2 centuries ago. Realizing the errors his race did, he was about to quit being a Quincy. That was until Ichigo pulled him to Kisuke and had Uryu's Quincy cross modified the same way his own was done. Since then Uryu had a bit trouble creating the bows, but Ichigo taught him how Shinigami used their own Ryoryoku reserves to fuel their Zanpakuto, and so Uryu once again was able to create proper bows even if he was using the Kajaku, as he was more of a traditional guy, to which Ichigo snickered. Though Uryu still had to follow the same theory for Licked Region, his number of arrows did end up increasing. Now at the age of 12 bordering on 13 he could fire 1,000 arrows at once, while Ichigo fired 3,000. Ichigo suggested multiple times to learn using a high-leg bojin, but he refused. Since then Ichigo even stopped bringing up that matter. While they made progress on the Quincy arts, Ichigo was also progressing in his hollow and Shinigami powers. Sometimes he even sparred against Uryu not as a Quincy but as a Shinigami. He haven't been told Shironai's name yet, and every time he gets the same response. You'll know when the time comes instinctually, but he could roughly guess that the time was soon. Maybe he had to prove himself, the same way he did with his Shinigami Zanpakuto. Ichigo even learnt to mix in Shunpo and Sunido, naming the new one as Shunido, and the mix of Shunpo and Hienkyaku as Hierenpo. He has been sharpening his skills with his Zanpakuto spirits, and since he's mastered Shikai, and according to them has a huge Ryoryoku reserve, he might as well start his Bankai training. To avoid pressuring his body, he started with materializing Juhabok and often played chess with him to keep his mind sharp and clear. And the other times, Juhabok took tests to see how much he has progressed in Quincy arts and teach him more. Then after that he started materializing Shironai and spar with him in Hakuda, Ho-Ho and Hollow powers. No Kaido and Zanpakuto, as that would mean mixing Shinigami powers as well. After the past few months of materializing, he could maintain their presence in the real world for about 6 to 8 hours. His spirit said he was making progress, and it was considerably faster and more than an ordinary Shinigami. As for Kisuke, he has been stumped. He just couldn't understand why. Just why was Ichigo's Ryatsu levels the same? He's unlocked and mastered Shikai, learnt bringing his spirits to the real world, and yet his Ryatsu levels were the same. He'd even went as far as to make a device to measure and keep records of his Ryatsu levels, and all showed the same amount. He even had Ichigo let his Ryatsu leak continuously without control, and every time the results were the same, and it was pissing him off. Never had he put his hand on a puzzle that he couldn't solve. But this, not happening. He traced back his every steps the past years to see where he had gone wrong but found nothing. He simply gave up, cursing the damn marble that he created. Isshin on the other hand had been recovering his Ryatsu faster and was now able to get out of his body with a mod soul. He too had been sparring with Ichigo to get the rust off of him. He couldn't release his Shikai yet, but was still able to give Ichigo a run for his money, even though Ichigo's Shikai was even more dangerous and explosive than his own. He jinzened every time he was free and got into practice with his Zanpakuto. In his inner world he could go all out, no problem. Hollows did attack the town, but they were quickly purified by either Uryu or Ichigo. On the days of their tests, Isshin often took up the mantle and did their job, all the while keeping a low profile. Isshin finally learned how Godai 13 has been weakened. They weren't sending Shinigami to patrol the city and rarely brought academy students. Was this his doing? It's a possibility, since he probably wouldn't want anyone strong to stand in his way. It'd be a waste of time and hassle to deal with them. As of now, Isshin was sitting with Kisuke listening to what Kisuke was saying about his son's progress. While he's progressing very well and fast, his Ryatsu levels are still the same. Isshin was a bit confused. How can one progress this much with such low Ryatsu? He's seen the damage Ichigo does in releasing his Shikai, but there never was a considerable increase in energy. Not to mention that Ichigo was now even summoning his spirits now to train with them. He's seen how brutal Shiro and Ao can be. They are probably the ones depending solely on instincts fueled by emotions and get stronger with emotions like anger. On the other hand, Akka and Juhabok taught him how to keep a level head and calm calculating mind in a battle. With the training of those four, his body fights on instincts in a fluid motion thanks to Akka and always knows when to stop. That's a good progress, but even so, why didn't his Ryatsu increase? Isshin was more surprised to know that his son could store his Zanpakuto in pocket dimensions in thin air. They were surprisingly similar to those Gargantas that Hollows use. Isshin was caught off guard multiple times by Ichigo, who at those times were keeping his assassination skills sharp. When asked why him, the answer he got was a bit irritating. Because your reactions are funnier. He was then later told that he'd often sneak up in Uryu and many more, taking pleasure in surprising them. Yoruichi was proud. His daughters were showing signs of spiritual awareness, so on their birthdays, he got them seals in the form of jewelry, or in Karin's case, wristbands and other sports-related accessories. He often worked on Hakuta with Ichigo whenever Ichigo's guard was lowered, and he always ended up losing the brawls, well, most of them. Though he and the others were all worried about what his plans were, as he could get into action anytime he wishes to do so. Fate was a bitch to his family. Finally 13. Ichigo started working on his Hyro and Zero. It didn't take much time for him to get a good hold on the theories and try them out. In fact, he instinctively did them like other hollows, which was something Shiro wasn't expecting since he wasn't purely a hollow. Then Ichigo was surprised when Shiro told him to ask the shopkeeper for another Asachi. When asked why, he said, Akana now has their own set of Asachi to channel their power. Jua has your Quincy cross, so I also need to channel my power through an Asachi. Ichigo then asked why not something else, to which he said, I'm a Zanpakuto spirit as well, albeit one containing your hollow powers. Like Akka and now I also have 2 releases, but you'll have to earn them. Then he relayed the message to Urahara, who was shocked but asked to give him 3 days to manage an Asachi. He just nodded and used the underground basement to go through his Shinigami and Quincy skills before going to his hollow powers. He always does the one he wishes to focus on more at the end. He was proficient with Pesquisa and had managed to deal more damage with Ballas. After that, he focused on creating Zeros and firing them. He managed to regulate the power output in each of them, ranging from laser beams to tunnel-shaped beams. He's already lost count of how many times he destroyed the basement, but it wasn't enough to get traced by Soul Society. By the time he was done, it was dinner time and he rushed back to his house only to stop at the scene. A girl, probably the same age as him, sobbing on the couch of the clinic. His father was checking the patient, who from what he could sense was nearly dead, and in the next moment became a plus soul. The plus soul tried talking to the girl but wasn't able to get through to her since she couldn't see ghosts. He frowned at the scene but met the plus soul in the eyes, who brightened up when he saw Ichigo waving to follow him. The plus soul followed him out of earshot and asked what happened and why could he see him when his sister couldn't. Ichigo frowned and took a deep breath. He said, I'm sorry, but you're dead. When the plus soul gave him an incredulous look, he grabbed the chain and tugged lightly, causing the plus soul to yelp in pain. See this chain? It's broken and isn't connected to your body over there. He knew breaking the news could bring despair to the man and end up making him a hollow. To his surprise, the plus soul took a deep breath and calmed down. He frowned and said, my name is Inao Sora. She is my sister over there, Inao IchiHime. What's your name? And how can you see me when my sister can't? Ichigo shrugged off his surprise and answered, my name is Kurosaki Ichigo, and I'm not a human. That's why I can see you. The man looked bewildered but nodded nonetheless. I'm sorry, but if you don't pass on to the afterlife, then I'm afraid there will be monsters looking for souls like you. And it's a pain dealing with them. You can do that. The man asked and frowned again. But what will happen to my sister? Ichigo asked, what about relatives? Can't they take her in? The man grimaced and shook his head. I was the only one she had and now I'm gone. Ichigo thought for a while and an idea came to him. If you don't mind, we can take her in. I'm pretty sure Dad wouldn't mind. He's aware of us talking, but what? He's not sure. The man's face brightened up and he grabbed Ichigo's hands. Really? You'll do that? I'm the eldest of the siblings. I'm pretty sure the twins can get used to having a big sister as well. The man started crying, but it was out of happiness. He started glowing and asked what was happening. Ichigo said, you're passing on to the afterlife. I see. Thank you, Ichigo. Thank you for willing to take my sister in your care. Ichigo smiled and nodded. You're welcome. Goodbye. With that, the man successfully passed on and Ichigo returned to the clinic. His father raised an eyebrow, to which Ichigo nodded, indicating the work was done. His father sighed and looked at the slumbering girl. His father told him that the news broke her heart and she cried her eyes out. "Dad," he called out seriously to his father, who acknowledged him. "Can you adopt her into our family? I talked with her brother and it's what allowed him to successfully pass on." Isshin simply smiled at his son and said, "Of course. The twins would love to have an elder sister as well, and hopefully she will as well." He then covered her in a blanket and turned to Ichigo. "Won't you go to sleep?" Ichigo ate his dinner while talking to his father about the arrangements for her to move in, and with that done he said, "I'll stay and watch over her. She'll need someone her age when she wakes up." Isshin looked at him for a while, thinking how much Ichigo has matured over the last 3 years, and it hurt him to know that he basically handed his son the sword and pushed him into a world where he has no business in. He sighed and smiled before nodding and left the orange duo. Ichigo focused and summoned one of his spirits. "Akane, can you please watch over her while I take a bath and bring a futon?" "Of course," came her sweet reply. Ichigo nodded in thanks and went to get done with what was left to do. She simply looked down at the girl and frowned. To lose everyone at an age so early was painful. She could only imagine what the girl was going through. She was looking forward to see how the girl behaves when she wakes up. It took only 10 minutes to be done for Ichigo, and after setting his futon, he picked the girl up and put her on another bed and covered her with a blanket. With that done, he asked Taka to watch over them while they slept. This would also work in his favor for his Bankai training. She set his head on her lap as he lied down on the futon and ran her fingers through his hair and lulled him to sleep. He'd need it after all. The next morning would be hectic. The next morning Ichigo woke up before the others and started preparing breakfast. A few moments later the twins came and sat down on the table waiting for their brother to serve breakfast. Yuzu stood up and went to help Ichigo, who gladly let her help. Their father came and jumped on Ichigo only to be punched in the face. When he was done setting up their breakfast, he took another plate and filled it with food. He told them that he's going to check up on the girl and see how she's doing. He went into the clinic and saw her stir. He placed the plate on the table near the bed and waited for her to fully wake up. She sat up yawning cutely and rubbed her eyes, then looked at her surroundings and looked confused. She then tilted her head in confusion, and then the last night's memory came rushing back to her. She then turned to the bed next to her and saw the lump under the blanket. As he expected, she started sobbing and covered her face with her hands while she cried. Not liking one bit what was happening, Ichigo sat next to her and embraced her. She tensed a bit before throwing her arms around him and cried her eyes out, realizing that he was someone her age. The twins peeked in the room and saw their brother holding the girl, all the while running circles on her back. He noticed them and put a finger on his lips and shooed them. They left the two and went back to their room. Isshin saw the scene and thought back to what Ichigo had asked of him. "Can you adopt her into our family?" He frowned but decided to wait for the girl to decide and left the place, leaving the matter to Ichigo's hands. Back at the clinic, the girl had calmed down and was still embracing Ichigo like he was her lifeline. Ichigo then decided to start a conversation. "Hey, my name is Kurosaki Ichigo. What's yours?" Though he knew who she was, he asked again, deciding not to creep her out by how he knew her name. She sniffed and spoke up. "My name is Ayano IchiHime. I am the sister of the one who died last night here." She wasn't angry at them. No, the doctor did everything he could but failed. She won't hold a grudge against him. She was late in bringing her brother. She then started crying again and said, "What will I do now? I don't have anyone anymore." Seeing his chance, he said, "Then why don't you start staying with us?" His suggestion caught her off guard as she looked at him bewildered. "BB, but I'll become a burden to you." "I can't do that." "Yes you can. And no, you won't be a burden. Dad and I talked about it and he agreed taking you in. You can keep your surname if you wish." He countered with a frown and smiled at her. "Besides, I can't let a young girl like you live alone. I'd be worried sick if I let you live by yourself." "Boo. No buts. Besides, you'll have a family to live with. You won't be alone in this world. Come on, you'll love my sisters." IchiHime thought for a bit before deciding that his offer was a good one and she wouldn't be alone. She'd have a new family and siblings to look after. She then turned to him and wiped her tears. "Okay, I agree." Ichigo then smiled brightly at her and hugged her. "That's the spirit. Welcome to the family." IchiHime thanked him and hugged him back. Ichigo might be her new brother, but that doesn't mean he'll replace Sora. Sora will always be her brother and so will Ichigo. "Now then Hime, eat up. I cooked breakfast and brought it for you." Ichigo smiled at her and gave her the plate. She then began eating slowly and noticed that the doctor, or rather her new father, leaning on the doorframe looking at them with a smile. Like he said, "Welcome to the family, IchiHime," Isshin said while he walked toward her and patted her on the head. Tears gathered in her eyes as she remembered her real father never talking to her like this. Seeing her tears, Ichigo took a tissue and cleaned the tears, getting a thank you from her, to which he smiled and said it was no problem. "IchiHime, we'll have to bring in your belongings and then get you properly adopted to our family," IchiHime said, to which IchiHime nodded. Then two new figures appeared before her and looked at her. "Hi, I'm Kurosaki Yuzu," the light brown-haired girl said to her. "And I'm Karin. So you're the one we're going to have as a new family member?" she asked, smiling at her. IchiHime nodded and introduced herself. The twins were quite happy to have someone new into the family and got along with her rather well. IchiHime coughed and said, "Girls, we'll be gone for an hour or two. Once we return with her, then you can talk to her more. Okay?" he asked them gently. They reluctantly nodded, and with a quick "see you" they left. IchiHime then turned to the orange-haired duo and said, "Let's go, shall we?" The duo nodded and then got ready to leave. Watching them chatting away, he sighed and looked at the photo of his late wife and smiled. "You'd be proud of him, Masaki." Chapter 3, Visored. It's been 3 months since IchiHime had been adopted into the Kurosaki family. The family had been livelier ever since. Ichigo and IchiHime looked after everyone like the family heads and did most of the chores. After their mother died, IchiHime wanted to take hold of the chores, but Ichigo soundly told him not to since he was already a busy man as a doctor. Even still, he helped the two whenever he could. When IchiHime returned to school next day with Ichigo, the school was gossiping about them being couples, to which IchiHime blushed while Ichigo scowled. Tatsuki, on the other hand, was worried for her but was relieved to see her best friend smiling like usual, not the forced one she'd expected. Tatsuki's reaction was hilarious when IchiHime publicly called him IchiHime. Ichigo couldn't stop snickering every time he saw Tatsuki. She even chased him at one point for doing so. By the end of the day, the school knew that IchiHime was adopted into the Kurosaki family. Tatsuki wasn't sure whether to be relieved or worried considering who the father was, but then remembered the twins and was relieved that her friend would be happy living with them instead of alone. Since then, Tatsuki's visit to the Kurosaki house had been frequent. She threw a fit when she heard that IchiHime shared the same room as Ichigo, but when she saw the 2-story bed, she relaxed. Ichigo's room had a bit of changes done to it. Another wardrobe and a study table was added. He didn't mind. At least he wouldn't be studying alone in his room. As for his progress, he got to know Shiro's name. Zangetsu was the name, though if he wanted to learn his Resurreccion, he'd have to defeat Zangetsu in his Resurreccion form. Should he succeed, he'd be taught how to master the form and be as strong as he already was in using Shikai. When he saw the Resurreccion, he was fascinated at how fierce the form looked, but he later found out the hard way how strong the form was by being its rag doll. Ao, on the other hand, laughed hard at the scene but was later forced to face the same fate as her master. After every training session was over in his inner world or the material world, he'd often lie down on Akane's lap and nap while she'd comb his hair, lulling him to sleep. He'd come clear with IchiHime about his powers and whatnot, and she was quite impressed and proud to have an amazing brother like him. As for his training with Uryu, the pencil had progressed rather well and now could fire 2,000 arrows at once, even though he used the same traditional way of using licked region. Quincy arts wasn't the only thing they focused on. Ichigo had been training him in hand-to-hand combat, as well as using swords, because one simply cannot always fight in long range. They had become closer friends and often studied together at his house or at random cafes. Both of them always snatched the top 2 positions in their class. Uryu no longer destroyed souls, and as much as he hated Soul Society, he didn't want to go to hell for destroying souls. So he purified souls just like Ichigo with his bow. The two would often take turns. They would alternate every day dealing with the hollows to make sure that none of them were left behind the class by that much. As for the street thugs, when they had stumbled upon the orange-haired duo, they tried making a move on IchiHime in front of Ichigo, and the day for those fools didn't end well. Ichigo twisted their bones in different angles and sent one of 2 into short-time coma. Since then, the thugs had always kept distance. The same thing happened on another day when they were accompanied by Tatsuki as well, and she was impressed by how strong Ichigo had become over the years. When she asked how he got strong, he simply told her about his father's ambushes, which for some reason creeped her out. Heck, whenever the Kurosaki matriarch tried hugging Tatsuki, calling her his 4th daughter, and the man would often end up beaten by her hands and pass out after giving her a thumbs up. Thanks to Tatsuki's frequent visits, Ichigo and she had repaired their broken friendship due to their drifting apart. Even though IchiHime couldn't see spirits, she had asked Ichigo to train her in hand-to-hand combat so that she always didn't need to be protected. She wanted to have her brothers back in dealing with the thugs. Seeing her determination, he decided to take her under his wing, and it'd help him in the long run as well, so why not? 5 months later, he was finally able to achieve his Resurreccion, though it wasn't the same as the one Zangetsu had shown him. His one was immature and needed more training to reach the perfect form, if not better than what Zangetsu had shown him. He was more than determined and for the moment focused on mastering the form and reaching perfection. After all, practice makes a man perfect. And besides, his training in the underground basement of Kisuke gave the shopkeeper the best chance to study the form. He even sometimes had sparred against Ichigo in that form, and even though the form was in a judge's level hollow, it was as strong as a Vasto Lord. But knowing the original hollow white, he should have expected it. During his training in hopes of mastering his hollow form, he'd often materialize his other spirits as well as Zangetsu in the Resurreccion form and fight all of them at once, further impressing his mentors at how he'd progressed. Just because he was focusing on mastering the form doesn't mean he wasn't keeping in touch with his Shinigami and Quincy powers. He then made an interesting discovery. He could use Kaido in his hollow form, so he made use of this chance to master the Kaido spells to the level he could perform them with just their name. He had mastered Hado and Bakuto up to the 70s. Further training with Yoruichi allowed him to polish everything he learnt on speed, assassination and stealth. Kisuke on the other hand had taught him how to modify or create his own Kaido, which he failed multiple times and decided to try after he mastered Hado and Bakuto up to the 90s. Though, the same thing kept on bugging the scientist. Why wasn't there any kind of change in Ryatsu if he was growing so strong? He decided to completely drop the matter, seeing as it doesn't produce any kind of satisfactory results, and besides, he can always find out more when Ichigo finally learns Bankai. Yup, I'll wait till he achieves Bankai, he thought, though he did often wonder whether he was aware of the events or not. Only time will tell. School ended just now. Ichigo had a nagging feeling in the back of his mind that he was forgetting something important. He asked his spirits, but they in a suspiciously innocent manner said they didn't know. Are you okay, IchiHime? IchiHime asked. Yeah, it's just that I feel like I'm forgetting something, Ichigo replied, scratching his head. Knowing you, whatever it is will cause trouble. Now let's go, Tatsuki said, picking her bag, and IchiHime nodded. Bite me, Ichigo said, scowling at her as he slung his bag over his shoulder. The closer he got to the school gates, the more his instincts started screaming at him. He kept glancing everywhere. Heck, he even used Pesquisa to make sure nothing was wrong. Just as he was sure that everything was fine, a pair of familiar slender mocha arms and legs wrapped around his neck and waist, along with two soft mounds of flesh pressed against his back. A seductive voice whispered into his ears, Ikai-chan. Apparently the other two also noticed the sudden arrival and jumped a bit. Ichigo sighed and said in a tired voice, Yoruichi ni, what are you doing here? And how many times do I have to tell you not to call me that? The feeling that he was forgetting something increased suddenly. Yoruichi pouted and rubbed her cheeks with his. Aw, don't be so rude. I've missed you, and besides I can call you whatever I want. By this point the four had moved quite a distance from the school, with Yoruichi still hanging on Ichigo. Ichigo smirked and then said, if that is the case, then that means I can also call you whatever I want. Like Kitty-sensei or Kitty-chan or just Yoruichi. His smirk vanished and paled as soon as he saw her Cheshire grin starting to split her face. Oh, then by all means do call me those. That would mean, she paused and whispered to him in a husky and seductive voice, I can jump you right here and now. All this time I didn't because you've been adding me to it. But now if you remove it, then you won't even know when you're deep inside me. She ended, biting on his ear. He nearly moaned. She smirked in victory, seeing Ichigo's red face. And no, then I'd rather still add ni after your name. Yoruichi pouted again but didn't let go of him. Since Tatsuki AMD IchiHime was a bit ahead of them, Tatsuki asked IchiHime who the lady clinging to Ichigo was. Apparently she was a family friend and often hanged out with the two. Finding their interaction weird, she asked, then why is she riding him like that? Her awkward wording made herself blush and make IchiHime giggle. That's something the two always did. Something about keeping Ikai strong and increasing his muscle mass, IchiHime said, tapping her chin. And besides, it's kind of fun riding him like that, IchiHime said, slightly teasing her friend in a suggestive manner, wiggling her eyebrows. Seeing her friend's red face, she placed a hand on her mouth and said in mock realization, oh my, don't tell me you want to be in her position. If so, why don't you ask him? She ended with her eyes glinting mischievously. She laughed when Tatsuki's face turned a deeper red. Hime ni, Ichigo called, getting IchiHime's attention. Can you take my bag? I'm gonna hang out with this kitty. IchiHime giggled and took his bag. Enjoy. Wanna join us, Hime-chan? It'll be fun, Yoruichi asked with a mischievous smile. IchiHime giggled and said, another time, Yoruichi-ni-san. I'm going to hang out with Tatsuki now. Yoruichi nodded and tugged on her ride's hair, making him turn to the opposite direction. By the time the two were gone, Tatsuki had relatively calmed down from IchiHime's teasing. Her brain even formed suggestive images of her riding Ichigo, which further embarrassed her. Will he be fine? She asked, looking in the duo's direction. Missing him already? IchiHime asked, wiggling her eyebrows. When the hell did you learn teasing? Tatsuki exclaimed. IchiHime shrugged and said, blame Yoruichi Nisan for that. You're bound to pick up habits from her the longer you stay around her. Tatsuki deflated at her words while getting her back patted. Tatsuki did notice one thing though. Ichigo was quite strong for someone his age. He was even taller than her and everyone in the class except for that Sato guy. She had doubts when he single-handedly struck the thugs down, but today's event diminished her doubts and made her certain about the fact that Ichigo was indeed stronger than her and his peers. She sighed knowing that she won't be able to stand by his side as his equal anymore. Just as the two reached the Kurosaki Resurrections, Tatsuki yet again had to bash the matriarch's skull as soon as the two reached the door to the house. Good job, my fourth down. GH'ter, the man said before he passed out. When will he stop? Tatsuki said as she followed IchiHime into her and Ichigo's room. Okay, speak up, Yoruichi ni. Why are you here? Ichigo asked as the two headed towards Kisuke's shop with Yoruichi still hanging on to him. The people passing by them gave the two weird looks, but they ignored it. Yoruichi pouted, oh come on Ikai-chan. Why do you think that every time I come to pick you up something's wrong? She received a dry look from him and gave up. Fine, someone's here to meet you. He and bunch of others specialize in holofication, so they could help you train in your holofeed form. Another bunch of exiles? Ichigo asked with a raised eyebrow, to which Yoruichi nodded. By now the two have arrived at the shop and Ichigo was about to knock on the door just in time for the shopkeeper to open the door, hiding his face with the ridiculous fan. My, Yoruichi-san. Still enjoying your ride it seems. Kisuke said in a suggestive manner. That sounds so wrong. Ichigo said. Yet so right. Yoruichi ended for him as the trio entered the shop. Ichigo entered the shop and went to the living room where he found an unknown blonde man lying on his side twirling a newsboy cap while looking outside. The man turned his head to see the duo and grinned widely, showing his teeth. Never took you for a cradle robber, Yoruichi, he said. While this berry over here is irresistibly cute. And I love cute things, Yoruichi said cheerfully, grinning widely. Don't talk like I'm not here. And who's this piano face? Ichigo said irritably. Silence fell over the room, which was broken by Yoruichi howling with laughter while said piano face person's left eye twitched. Oh, that's rich, Yoruichi said, still laughing. When she laughed, she accidentally fell off of Ichigo and fell to the ground rolling and still kept on laughing. Oh, my sides hurt. Ichigo rolled his shoulders and arched his back and sighed when he heard the popping sounds. Haha, keep laughing, Yoruichi, the man dryly said, rolling his eyes at her. And kid, my name is Hirako Shinji, not piano face, he said as he donned a hollow mask in order to intimidate Ichigo, only to get a dry look in return. And I'm not a kid. My name is Kurosaki Ichigo, Ichigo said, scowling. And what's the mask for? Can't you fully holofy? Shinji narrowed his eyes and said, if I holofy, my body gets taken over by my inner hollow. So no, I can't. This mask allows me to suppress your hollow and tap into its powers, Ichigo concluded, crossing his arms. By this point Yoruichi had stopped laughing and was joined by Kisuke as well, who was interested in seeing how their meeting goes. So what's your story? How do you get exiled and why do you have an inner hollow? Shinji sat up and looked at Kisuke. The kid is smarter than he looks. So, should I? Getting a nod, he started to explain his story of exile, and the others with him. Ichigo intently listened to the whole story and asked some questions in return. When Shinji was done with his story, he again looked outside. Silence fell over the room, which was broken by Ichigo. So when do we start? Shinji looked at him and said, show me your mask. My hollow powers aren't stored in a mask, Ichigo said as a small void opened up beside him from which a sword hilt was sticking out. My powers are stored in a Zanpakuto and I holofy with the release command. Why don't I show you in the basement? He said, completely pulling out the sheathed Zanpakuto. Shinji looked at the other two occupants in the room and got a nod from the two. He picked up his own Zanpakuto from behind him and got up. Let's see then. Shinji was impressed. Not only was the kid different from him and the others, he could also completely holofy and stay in control. His sealed Zanpakuto was a stark white dado with a blue manji guard. The hilt had white wrappings and the diamonds were blue along with the chain dangling from the butt end. The sheath itself was blue as well. The transformation was another thing. The release command obliterate Zangetsu. In an explosion of white and red, Ryatsu Ichigo transformed into a giant hybrid of a lizard and human. His hair lengthened down to his waist. His mask was fearsome with a feral grin and red markings on the left side while a single black line was on the right. The hollow hole was on the middle of his chest from which red-tinted black tribal markings ran along his upper body, connecting with the lone stripe on the right side of the mask. Strange thing was that the hollow was properly clothed. A white sleeveless coat with black markings in the end with a white undershirt. The hollow feet Ichigo wore a white baggy hakama which narrowed down below the calf to the ankles with thin and long black vertical kites. It didn't have any footwear and had clawed feet with black-tipped red talons. His clawed fingers halfway became blades which were colored red with black tips. In his hand was a massive kyber knife. It was pure white with a small portion in the middle being black with a black cylindrical hilt which had a red chain dangling from the butt end. I haven't completed this form yet. From what Zenjutsu said, I'm currently in the 3rd stage. The next stage would complete the form completely. Hollow Ichigo said, bringing Shinji out of his reverie. You haven't completed this form yet. This is the same as a captain's bankai. Shinji thought with wide eyes. You ready? Cause I am. Ichigo said as he vanished with a static sound and appeared directly above Shinji, bringing his massive knife down completely, intending to cleave him in half. Shinji immediately flashed out of the way and saw the damage that swing did. The ground cracked and a crater was formed. I'd have been dead if I tried blocking the attack. He thought and summoned his pharaoh-type hollow mask. He went for the attack and tried cutting Ichigo. His eyes widened under the mask when sparks flew as soon as his sword cut through the clothing. The feral grin on the mask widened. Try blocking this, Ichigo said as gathered Ryatsu into the blade and swung at his opponent. Getsuga Tensho, he roared as he sent a massive red highlighted white energy arc at Shinji. No way in hell am I blocking that, Shinji said as he flashed out of the way only to be hit by a nameless Getsuga Tensho on the chest, shattering his mask. Though by some luck he was able to create a Danku shield which of course was blasted into pieces. The attack left him panting and bleeding at some places while there were some burn marks on his body. Ichigo quickly got out of his Resurreccion and rushed to Shinji, and started applying healing Kaido to stop the bleeding. Kisuke called Tessai, who immediately came down and started applying Kaido to heal the burn marks as he thanked Ichigo and complimented on his progress. So, what did you decide, Hirako-san? Kisuke said, hiding his grin under the fan. Shinji coughed a bit and said, I'll come back again in 2 days and tell you. When he was healed well enough, he stood up and looked at himself. You did quite a number on me, kid, he said as he nodded in approval at Ichigo. Then he climbed the ladder and flashed back to wherever he was hiding with the others. That was impressive, Ikai-chan. Shinji is a captain and yet you gave him a run for his money, Yoruichi said as she picked him up and headed towards the hot spring, eager to take a dip with the berry. He didn't use his shikai though, Ichigo said as he simply let her carry him to the hot spring, gotten used to her tendencies whenever he sweats. Well, you didn't give him the chance to release it, and even still he was quite good in Senjutsu compared to the others. And what class was your hollow form? A Vasto Lord. No, that was my Ajuch's form, and the second release is my Vasto Lord form. Yoruichi nearly dropped him in shock. If that form was his Ajuch's, then she feared what his Vasto Lord form would be. Shinji stood in front of the warehouse in his somewhat healed state and knocked on the barrier. A gap the size of a door opened up, followed by a sandal which hit him straight in the face with a loud smack. He simply threw it back at his assailant and went straight to the giant man in green and immediately asked to heal him more. It's not like he didn't trust Tessai. Hachai was an even better healer than him despite being the vice commander of the Kaido Corps back then. What the hell happened to Yabaldi? A blonde pigtailed girl who threw the sandal at him asked. Shinji scowled at her and said, I got owned by a kid. Silence followed, which was then broken by everyone laughing at him. Seriously, a kid? You got owned by a kid? Lisa asked, looking up from her magazine. The kid can holofy and stay in control. He didn't need a mask. They'd shut them up. Tell us everything, Kensei said seriously. It took nearly half an hour to explain everything that happened back at the shop, and there was laughing involved when he said he was called Piano Face. Is this kid the one you went to check up on, Shinji? Rose asked, to which said person nodded. Well, Dion, what are you waiting for? Bring the kid tomorrow and we'll see how he fares against us, Kensei said, to which Shinji snickered. What? You'll see what happens when you fight him. That was all he said before he went to take a bath and nap. Ichigo groaned when he saw Yoruichi again at his school gate waving at him. He simply sighed and walked up to her, and like yesterday she again latched onto him and took him towards the shop where he met up with Shinji again. When Shinji got a raised eyebrow from Ichigo, he said, walking up to him, the gang wants to see what you're made of. You common? He ended with a challenging smirk and snickered when he saw Yoruichi riding him again. You seem to enjoy riding him, Yoruichi. Cradle robber much? Yoruichi rubbed her cheeks with Ichigo's and said, you'd have understood if you were a girl. Now let's go, I wanna see as well. The kid still hasn't ends. Let's go, Ichigo said, scowling, which turned to a pained expression soon. Oh, let go. Only if you drop the scowl, Yoruichi reprimanded. Fine, there, happy, Ichigo replied, mock grinning at her. She nodded and he reverted to his impassive expression. What are you waiting for? Lead the way, piano face. Shinji growled about disrespectful brats and told them to follow him as he walked away. He smirked when he imagined how Ichigo would squash the others, especially Hikori. It took nearly an hour to reach the warehouse, and Yoruichi had hopped off of him and mock-dusted her clothes and straightened them, to which Ichigo simply rolled his eyes but said nothing. He had already gotten used to her exhibitionism and perverted antics to tease him. Shinji knocked on the invisible barrier, which glowed yellow and opened in the size of a door, followed by a sandal. This time Shinji was prepared and ducked only for said sandal to hit Ichigo straight in the face with a loud smack sound, causing both Yoruichi and Shinji to double over in laughter. "About damn time you came, you brats," came an irritated voice. The owner of the voice was a bit shorter than Ichigo, with blonde spiky pigtails and a track suit with a Zanpakuto on her back. "Listen up, Baldy. The name is Hikori. A Visored. Got it?" Then she extended her hand and said, "Gimme back my sandal." Ichigo simply looked at Shinji, who pointed his finger at the seemingly unaware girl, signifying that it was her who threw the sandal at him. A tick mark appeared on Ichigo's temple, who gave a forced smile and threw the sandal at her face with twice the strength she used. The sandal hit her with a louder smack sound, sending her flying deep inside the warehouse. Shinji snickered and thought, with these two around, things will be much funnier. He then led the two into the warehouse and introduced Ichigo to the others. Hikori, on the other hand, had passed out because of the force of the hit. "So you're the kid who clocked Shinji?" Kensei asked as he walked towards him. "Muguruma Kensei. Think you can go toe-to-toe with me and Hakuda? In your holofeed form, of course." Ichigo smirked and said, "No, I know I can. Where should we fight?" he said as he pulled out Zangetsu from the small dimensional gap on his left. Telling Ichigo to follow him, he asked Hakai to form a strong barrier for them. Apparently they had a similar training basement like that of Kisuke's. Both of them took their respective stances. Ichigo held his Zanpakuto in a reverse grip diagonally to the ground, while Kensei held his combat knife like Zanpakuto in a reverse horizontal grip. Together they said, "Obliterate Zangetsu." Divided by Bankai, Tekken Takakazi. Ichigo appeared in his holofeed form with the giant kyber knife in his right hand, and Kensei appeared in his own form. Takakazi transformed from a single combat knife into a pair of large knuckle blades, which Kensei held in each hand. Both blades have a curved silver edge, which tapers off to an outward point on either side. Segmented purple bands wrapped around the entirety of his arms, much like armor, while a thicker purple band arched behind him, over his head, with its ends protruding from under his shoulders. "So, wanna do it pure Hakuda?" Kensei asked, not expecting a reply from the holofeed Ichigo. Ichigo opened his maws and let out a breath. "Sure, why not?" he spoke in his distorted voice, shocking Kensei as he dug his Zanpakuto in the ground beside him. The feral grin on the mask changed to something similar to a smirk. "What? Didn't expect me to stay in control, did you?" Kensei shook his head and took his stance. "Show me what Yoruichi has been teaching you all this time." He charged at Ichigo as he finished saying that. "Let's do this," Ichigo said as he charged at the incoming Kensei. Both of them struck each other with a punch, each hitting the other's fist, getting into a stalemate. Kensei then cocked his left hand back and made a fist before throwing it at Ichigo, who simply answered in the same way. They kept on exchanging blows, shaking the whole compound. While Ichigo and Kensei were exchanging blows, the spectators were having their own discussion about the fight. The kid's holofeed form is quite powerful. To be able to exchange blows with Kensei and his Bankai is no easy feat, Love said. If you look at the fight carefully though, it's easy to tell that Ichigo has the upper hand. Lisa said. "How so?" Rose asked. "Ichigo is 13, is he not?" Lisa asked, to which Yoruichi nodded. You see, Ichigo in his holofeed form is far more stronger than a captain. And if you see carefully, Ichigo is holding back. Correct? The kid could have pounded Kensei by wrapping him with his tail, but he didn't. This time Shinji said. "A swing of his Zanpakuto is enough to shake your whole body up." "What the hell is that thing?" Hikori yelled as she stood beside Shinji. "Good morning," Shinji said sarcastically, only to get familiar with the ground. "Shut up, Baldy. Is that the brat?" Hikori said, to which everyone nodded. "Good, then I'll join in the fray as well," she said as she raced at Ichigo with her Zanpakuto released, a large cleaver with a serrated saw-like blade, and wore her mask. If it was any other time they would have stopped her, but they wanted to see how strong Ichigo was. Noticing Hikori rapidly approaching him, he charged black sparkling energy on his tail and formed an inverse triangle with 3 beaks protruding from each point. "Bakuto #30 Shitatsu Sansen," he said as he released the 3 beaks at Hikori, pinning her to a nearby mountain. "He can use Kaido in that form?" Shinji asked, surprised. "Hakai can do that as well, can't he?" Yoruichi asked, to which Shinji shook his head. I can only boost my power with the mask, but my Kaido doesn't change like his. Hakai said. Shitatsu Sansen is yellow in color while his is black. There's a difference. Oi Baldi, release me. How the hell did you even use Kaido in that form? Hikori asked from her pinned position. Apparently she can't break it no matter what. Ain't happening, Snaggletooth. You were my first experimental victim of Holofeed Kaido, Ichigo said as he returned back to exchanging blows with Kensei. You're good. To be able to keep up with me is no easy matter, Kensei said as he dodged a punch and retaliated with his own. I was surprised to see you clothed properly in that form, not to mention I really expected you to lose control. Well, thank you for the compliment, Ichigo said as he hit Kensei straight on the chest using his tail. He sonadoed behind Kensei and punched him again, eventually sending him crashing into Hikori, knocking her out along with him. And that's 2 for me, Ichigo said as he straightened up, still keeping the transformation, and just like he thought, he was attacked again. Mashiro drop kick. A masked Mashiro said as she attempted a drop kick on Ichigo. Ichigo simply grabbed her by her feet and threw her at the knocked out Kensei, and Hikori making the others laugh. Who's next? Ichigo asked as he looked back at the crowd. They all shook their heads in denial and came out of his transformation, his kyber knife returning back to its sealed state. How was it? He asked as he inserted the Zanpakuto back into the void on his left. That was splendid, Ichigo-kun. But how did you achieve this transformation? Rose asked. I was born with my hollow and he's quite overprotective, though I had to defeat him when he was in this state to achieve this transformation, Ichigo said as he lied down on Urwitch's awaiting lap. Even if he was taller than his peers, he was still shorter than her. Seeing Urwitch's and Ichigo's interaction, Lisa raised an eyebrow and asked, when did you become a cradle robber, Urwichi-san? Urwichi smirked and asked, oh, are you jealous, Lisa? All she got was a dry look from said assumed jealous person. No, considering how old you are and the age difference between you two makes it all the more strange to me, Lisa said with her usual deadpan expression, causing others to laugh at Urwich's dumbstruck look. Even Ichigo laughed, only to get a chop on his head and a glare from said old woman. Oh, shut up. I'm still young. I'm past 250 years only, so that still makes me young. Dead silence followed by her statement, which was broken with Shinji and Hiyori's combined laughter while the others scooted backwards to avoid said young woman's wrath. Chapter 4, Squad 0. Ever since his display of power in his transformed state, he had been visiting the Visoreds regularly and trained with them. Having learnt all of the abilities a hollow has, he ended up teaching them how to do the same. Since they weren't born with a hollow inside them, they could only tap into their artificial hollow's power and use them as a boost for a limited amount of time. Even so, he had the pleasure of teaching them everything about the powers of a hollow. A few months of constant training against them had completed his hollow feed form. Now, he had 2 hollow masks which were missing their lower jaw as shoulder pads. The hollow masks each had a horn protruding from the center of their forehead and their eyes were painted red. His main mask now had 2 vertical black lines on both sides, the mask which later joined with the tribal markings on his chest. His long orange hair shortened a little to his mid-back and some of it fell over his forehead. The claws on his hand extended a bit more. His clawed feet also now had blades, but they were at least a quarter the size of the ones on his hands. The blades were red with black tips. His tail now ended in a drill-like shape which was red in color with black tip. His clothes still remained the same, however, there was a bit change to his Zanpakuto. The base of the sword was now slanted and the blade continued with a section jutting out, acting as a guard with a chain that looped over the top and attached itself right before the point of the blade. His Siro and Bala were now more powerful and dense, doing twice the damage it did before completion. Zenjutsu said that he was proud of him, but he wasn't prepared yet to unlock the second release, or segunda etapa as he called it, since it had to be achieved the same way as Bankai. Ichigo readily agreed with him. He needed to get more familiar with the completed form after all. After a few more months of training in that form, he had a proper grasp over how to utilize its power to the max. Soon after that, he got into the final year of his middle school. A month after becoming 14, he had a sudden growth spurt which now made him as tall as up to the chin of Urwichi, to which she pouted at the cruelty of the world taking away his cuteness. He now had a more muscular figure that attracted attention of both young and old women alike. He had far more progressed in Kaido, performing Hado and Bakudo up to 80 seconds without incantation. He had learnt the barriers and seals along with Kaido from Hakai. Today was a free day for him, a day in which he'd do nothing spiritual world related, relaxing and studying. That's what he was doing until Karin came to his room holding a letter. IchiHime had gone for a sleepover at Tatsuki's, so he was alone in his room. Ikai Niai, a letter has come in your name. she said in her usual bored tone as she handed it over to him and left, giving him privacy. Ichigo was confused. Who'd sent him a letter, and why? When he saw the sender, he nearly screamed. Squad 0 was what written there. He took a few deep breaths and calmed himself down. He knew about Squad 0, or more specifically what Kisuke had told him about them, as his previous captain is now a Squad 0 officer. He shakily opened the letter and read the contents in it. Kurosaki Ichigo, it has come to our attention that you are aware of the impending doom that is Ihwach. We, the officers of Squad 0, or rather the Royal Guard, have been tasked by the Soul King himself to offer you the chance of special training for 1 to 2 years. We won't force you to come. It's a decision you'll make, and whatever you choose, we'll respect it. We're giving you a week to respond. Should you accept our invitation, push a bit of your Ryatsu into the insignia at the end of this letter, and a special Senkamen will open up which would lead you to the royal realm, where we'll be waiting for your arrival. Best regards, Squad 0. Ichigo was shocked, a bit pissed that he was kept an eye on by people he didn't know. But he thought about the pros and cons of this training. He'd certainly be trained by those who were much skilled and stronger than his current mentors and sparring partners together. He hadn't achieved Bankai in Segunda Etapa. Maybe he could achieve them there. He'll have to talk about it to his family and mentors. He immediately stood up and met his father at the clinic and showed him his letter. His father nearly died when he saw the sender. He read the letter with wide eyes and calmed down after he was finished reading it. What do you think I should do? Ichigo asked, feeling a bit lost. Isshin looked at him and frowned. What do you want to do? He asked with a serious face. Ichigo contemplated on what to do and took a deep breath. I want to go, but... He trailed off, glancing at the kitchen where his twin sisters were. But you don't want to leave them? Isshin asked, to which Ichigo nodded. Isshin sighed and stood up. Don't worry about them. Besides, they know what you're doing, so don't stress yourself. But what about my school? Ichigo asked, frowning. I'll have IchiHime keep the notes for you, and besides, the training is only for 2 years max. Isshin said dismissively. But you better inform Kisuke about this. Maybe consult with him about it. Ichigo nodded before turning towards the exit. I'll be going to see him now then. He then outstretched his hand with his palm facing upward, silently asking for the letter. His father handed him the letter and waved at him as he walked away. A short walk later, Ichigo arrived at the shop and knocked. The door slid open to reveal the humble shopkeeper with his signature hat on and the fan covering his lower face. My, what brings you here, Kurosaki-san? Weren't you supposed to be resting? Kisuke said in the same jovial manner. His smile dropped and closed his fan at the serious expression on the teenager's face. He turned and asked the teen to follow him deeper into the shop. On the way, Ichigo had asked Tessai to come and bring Yoruichi as well. He nodded and said that he'd send her first and then come with tea. Kisuke had many scenarios running through his head. What was the cause of his student's current predicament? He led the teen into the living room and sat opposite to him. A moment later, a black cat appeared and made itself comfortable in Ichigo's lap. Tessai soon arrived with tea and sat down a bit behind Kisuke. So, what's the matter? Kisuke asked. Instead of answering, Ichigo simply placed the letter on the table and pushed it towards Kisuke. As soon as said person's eyes landed on the letter, he jumped a bit in his seated position and looked at Ichigo with wide eyes. By that time, he had dropped his fan, forgetting to hide his surprise, to which Ichigo gave him a smirk. Seeing the wordless conversation, the cat reluctantly got off its makeshift bed and looked at the letter, having the same reaction. It looked at Ichigo and transformed to reveal a very naked Yoruichi, who immediately latched onto him and started wailing with tears pouring out of her eyes like river. NOOO. They are going to take my Ikai-chan away from me and pet him themselves. I won't let that happen. UWA. Ichigo didn't miss the jab though. I'm not a pet, Yoruichi ni. You're the one who's closer to a pet. He growled out as the woman continued to wail. Besides, I'll be gone for 2 years at best. NOOO. What if they want to keep you? At least let me take your oh-so-sweet innocence. So that's why you were crying? Ichigo asked incredulously. Yep, she replied happily, all traces of her tears and sadness gone. Their play was put to a halt when a cough was heard. They turned to look at an amused Kisuke. Well, someone's eager to get jumped on. He jokes before turning serious. What are you going to do? Ichigo took a sip of his tea and said, that's the reason I came here. I haven't decided and thought it'd be better to discuss about this with you guys since you were and are my mentors. What do you think I should do? NOOO. Don't leave. Thwack. Will you cut it out? I'm trying to be serious here. Ichigo said, hitting Yoruichi on the head. Okay, sheesh. You're such a spoilsport. But, this is something you're going to decide. I agree. We've taught you most of the things except for the highest level Kaidos, and training under them isn't a bad idea. Kisuke said, continuing where Yoruichi left off. Ichigo frowned. On one hand he wanted to go and on the other he didn't because of his family. If he was gone, then who'd look after the twins? His father could defend them and he didn't know how his departure would affect them. What will I tell the others? He asked, meaning about Tatsuki, who'd blow a fuse looking for him for his sudden disappearance. Well, tell them the military approached you for your reputation among the thugs. They saw your potential and wanted to recruit you. Kisuke said with a shrug. Yeah, the Godai 13 is similar to this country's military, so it won't be a problem. Besides, they are going to train you for 2 years at best. After that, Yoruichi paused and then whispered into his ears, "You're mine." She grinned widely at Ichigo's red face before transforming back to a cat. Quite the excuse you got there. But wouldn't paperwork be needed to be done? Leave those to me, Kisuke said excitedly. Ichigo sighed at his antics and stood up. He smiled and thanked them before leaving with the letter. When he broke news to his family, the twins, or rather Yuzu, started crying about him leaving, but after a bit of persuasion and promise of dropping by, she calmed down. Karin, being the more spiritually aware one, understood his need of getting stronger, so she didn't say anything and just wished him good luck. 2 days later, he was prepared to go. Before he left, he had told Yuzu and Karin to go to Tessai and learn Kaido so that they can defend themselves while he was gone. It wasn't like he didn't trust their father. It's more because they would sooner or later attract the attention of Hollows and their father can't always be there for them. His father with a heavy heart agreed on the matter and wished him luck. IchiHime knew about the truth and was given the task of telling the others the reason of his absence being him training with the military. She didn't want Tatsuki to be left out of this, but he again made his point across by telling her that Tatsuki would want to learn as well, eventually leading to an accident which he would not take the responsibility of. IchiHime reluctantly nodded and told him she'd keep this a secret as it was the least she could do for him, and ended up getting chopped on the head. Everyone, the ones in the shop, his family and the Visoreds, were there to see him off at the Senkamen leading to the royal realm to begin his training. "See you in 2 years, he said as he entered the Senkamen and headed for the royal realm. After a few moments, Shinji spoke up. "The kid's gonna return a hell lot stronger, won't he?" "Yup. Oh, Captain Aizen," a silver-haired man greeted as he walked up to said captain. Jin, the bespectacled man, nodded in greeting before going over some reports made by Tozen. At this point he always had the dark-skinned man prepare his paperwork. "What are you up to?" "Going over some various information on our experiments. Do you have any news, Jin?" "Your pet project has been kidnapped by a shadow." Jin finished with his ever-growing grin on his face. "Explain," Aizen commanded. "Well, I was stalking your pet project when he left school, and was on his way home, and out of nowhere his shadow rose and swallowed him up." Silence followed by his report, which was broken by a sigh. "So he made the first move," Aizen said as he massaged his temples. "What will you do now, Captain Aizen?" Tozen asked, placing a cup of tea before said captain. "We'll improvise." "Isshin, yeah," Kisuke sighed before continuing. "With Ichigo gone, he might target the twins. What will you do?" "For now, train them in Kaido. Give them a Zanpakuto only if their spirits try to talk to them or something similar to that of Ichigo happens," Isshin said after a while of thinking, surprising the others. Tessai and Hakai nodded. Tessai then said, "Send them here after school. The two of us will train them." "Thank you. Hey, maybe I could train them in using." "What was that again, the Quincy call?" Yoruichi said. "Hirenkyaku," Kisuke answered. "Yes, that and Hakuda." "How about it, Isshin?" "I'd like that," the father of four said as he left. Ichigo stepped out of the Senkamen to see 5 figures awaiting him. The bald man in middle spoke up. "Welcome to the Soul Palace, Shiba Kurosaki Ichigo. I am Hayasu Bikaibe Monk, who calls the real name and leader of Squad 0 or the Royal Guard." The man ended with a grin. He appeared to be a large and broad individual with a bald head, red eyes, bushy eyebrows and a long black beard. He wore the standard Shinigami uniform beneath a white, long-sleeved Hikori decorated with the Royal Guard's emblem. The top of his uniform was open enough to expose his hairy chest. He also wore a large set of red prayer beads around his neck and a pair of single-toothed Tengugeta. The one to his immediate right said, "I'm Tenjiro Korinji Hot Spring Demon." The man appeared to be lean-built and very tall man with black hair arranged into an outlandishly large pompadour, or regent hairstyle, with tapered sideburns. He frequently chewed upon a small stick. Instead of the standard Shinigami uniform, he wore a waist-length white jacket that left most of his chest exposed but still had the Royal Guard emblem on its back, as well as the alternating circle and diamond pattern of a captain's Hikori along the bottom. His attire was completed by a black hakama, a large yellow sash around his waist and a pair of sandals. The one after him said, "I'm Hikofune Kiryu, ruler of Grain." She appeared to be a plump, purple-haired lady with styled swirl-shaped markings on her cheeks and black lips. She has a large silver adornment in her hair and wears the standard Shinigami uniform beneath a white, long-sleeved Hikori decorated with the Royal Guard's emblem. The one on IchiHime's immediate left said, "I'm Senjumaru Shirata Great Weave Guard." She appeared to be a slender and very youthful woman with fair skin and long, black hair that was adorned at the back by a large golden ornament in the shape of a crescent moon with numerous small lines radiating outwards. She wore the standard Shinigami uniform beneath a white long-sleeved Hikori, over which she donned a further white robe fastened at the front near the center of her chest. She also wore a pair of extremely thick-soled akobo. The last one exclaimed, "Yo, I'm Otsu-Nimeya, god of the sword. I look forward to forging your Zanpakuto." He appeared to be a dark-skinned man with thick, black hair that was shaven and dyed green on the sides of his head. He wore a variation of the Shinigami Shihakusho, featuring instead a green undergarment, and a shortened hakama that exposed his lower legs. Worn over this was a white, sleeveless puffer jacket that had the Royal Guard emblem on its back, as well as the alternating circle and diamond pattern of a captain's Hikori along the bottom. His attire was completed by gold-framed sunglasses with blue lenses and a pair of green slippers that were gold-trimmed and had a shoe-like appearance. Ichigo dumbly nodded and bowed in respect. "Hello, pleased to meet you. When are we beginning?" Ichigo was feeling awkward. These guys are on a completely different level than his former mentors, and if he is to become stronger, then he'd need their guidance. The five exchanged looks among them and then Shutara said, "No need to be polite. Speak freely and don't hesitate." She received a nod and then turned to IchiHime, who took the lead. "Before we begin your training, the Soul King wishes to speak with you. Follow me," he said and walked off towards the Greater Soul Palace where the Soul King resided. As they were about to walk, a group of men arrived and bowed before the two. "Ah, you'll be living with Shutara, so hand over your belongings to her men." With a hesitant nod, Ichigo did as instructed and followed the other man. After a few moments, the two reached the gates, which were opened by IchiHime, and Ichigo as indicated walked in and looked back at him with a questioning gaze. "I cannot be present during your meeting with the Soul King. Do not worry and be formal with him." Ichigo slightly nodded and walked in deeper into the place. After a minute he arrived at the throne room and he was shocked to see the condition of the Soul King. He was limbless, encased in crystal, and had galaxy-like eyes. The Soul King looked at him and nodded. "Do not fret, young Ichigo. Make yourself comfortable." As soon as he said that, a luxurious single-person couch appeared out of nowhere waiting to be sat upon. Ichigo took a few calming breaths and sat on the couch, which then pulled him closer to the king. "Okay, so aside my training we were supposed to talk about the return of Iwatch. Surely you're aware of the prophecy about him?" The Soul King asked, to which Ichigo nodded. "Good, now you see." The meeting had gone for 2 hours, and when Ichigo pushed open the doors looking tired, he came upon Tenjiro. "You look like shit, kid. Follow me," Tenjiro said and walked off with Ichigo closely behind. "We're starting training now?" Ichigo asked, tiredly rolling his shoulders. "No, first I'll dunk you in my springs and then send you to Hikofune. You'll eat there and then you'll be sent to the crazy Nimeya. After that you'll turn in for the night at Shutara's and the next morning you'll once again eat at Hikofune's. After that, your Shinigami arts and the other ones will be refined. Your training doesn't begin today, but every day counts." Ichigo protested, to which he got a bored look from Kenjiro. "Not my fault. The king himself doesn't want you to start training today, so we're beginning tomorrow," Kenjiro said. "Fine, so what does your hot springs do?" Tenjiro glanced at him and thought, so he already knows about the one of Kisukirahara. "Figures, why don't you check it out yourself?" He finished with a smirk as the two stood on a platform. "Sure," Ichigo said, unsure of the situation, as he was launched along with Tenjiro to his palace where the springs were stationed. After dipping in the springs, Ichigo was as promised sent to Kiryu Hikofune's palace, where he ate to his heart's content, and was even shocked to know about the woman's before and after cooking condition. Just as he stood on the platform that had sent him to Otsu-Nimeya's palace, he was told about his increase in Ryuryoku, which he in fact had noticed. When he arrived at the palace of Otsu-Nimeya, he was impressed with all the flashiness it had. He even shocked the man by noting that all of the women there had the exact same Ryatsu. Otsu was crying rivers of happiness to see that the kid before him was able to determine what was what. The man's ramblings were cut off by a girl very similar to Hikori in the name of Mira-chan, as the man had called her. She then pulled him towards a rather impressive hut where he was told to pass through the gate. Just as he stepped in, he fell crashing down to ground many feet below the door. He was about to demand an explanation for the act but stopped in his tracks when he heard growls behind him. He turned around and saw multiple undefined men surrounding him. He then noted that they felt blank, to which he was greeted to the sound of hands clapping. Well, Ichi-chan, now that you've figured out that they are Asaches, your task will be to find your ones among the hundreds of them. Good luck. Ichigo just raised an eyebrow at the man and crossed his hands as he stared down at the Asaches. He released his Ryatsu on them, causing them to fall flat on the ground, and heard cracking sounds from 3 different places. He immediately rushed and pulled those 3 from the horde and gently laid them before him. He reined in his Ryatsu, allowing the 3 and the other Asaches behind them to bow down to him in 3 lines. First line had 32 Asaches, with the second having 33, and the last had 35. Then all Asaches in the 3 lines merged and leaving only 3 behind, still bowing down to Ichigo. Nimaya, on the other hand, while his brain short-circuited at the view, identifying an individual's Zanpakuto by releasing their full Ryatsu and picking them up, judging from the cracks on the skin. Not only that, but they even bowed down to him. All of them merged into 3 and bowed down before the child. He knew that Ichigo had 3 Zanpakuto spirits, but to think something like this would happen. He was brought out of his reverie when he heard Ichigo's voice. Oi, Mohawk-san. What now? I've found them, but they don't look like I know they do. Mohawk-san, Otsu thought, and then shook his head. Touch each of them and push a little pit of your Ryoryoku into them. Ichigo nodded and stood before the one on the left and placed his hand on its head and pushed a bit of his Ryoryoku. It was covered in white ice sculpture, shocking Ichigo because he was sure he was a fire wielder. The ice sculpture shattered to reveal. Ow. Ichigo breathed out, surprised to see her smiling cheekily at him before standing a bit behind him on the left. He repeated the same thing with the one in the center, and this time, it was covered in reddish-orange fire with blue tints. The fire dispersed to reveal Akane. He greeted at the gently smiling woman who hugged him before standing beside her counterpart. He then repeated the same with the last and was thrown off balance at the burst of red-tinted white Ryatsu, which then formed a solid sphere with red wisps of energy swirling around it. It then cracked to reveal Shiro Nai. Ichigo greeted the masked man with a smirk before punching him and dodging the retaliation punch. Quite the greeting you got there, Kingy. The punch didn't hurt. Getting soft, are we? He jokingly said, getting a smirk in return, which then turned into a frown as he looked at the female duo. Aka was the same, but ow. She now had long hair colored a mix of black, blue, and white, with 2 wavy black horizontal lines along one side of her head. Her eyes are large and amber, with multiple rings inside them. She wore a scarf with vertical zigzag stripes and a furusode with a snowflake pattern along the hem and the bottom of the sleeves. What's the explanation for that ice and the flip in personality, ow? He asked, confused. Ao frowned and sighed, but before she could reply, Otsu spoke up. I can explain that. Get up here and follow me, the man exclaimed as he walked away with Mira. He was soon joined by the other 4. You see, all this time, you've been using a half-active Zanpakuto. You mean to say? Ichigo trailed off, only to be continued by Otsu. Correct. You're the first Shinigami to wield a Zanpakuto of 2 polar opposite elements, ice and fire. I can guarantee you that your ice will be stronger than that of Hire and Noru, but your fire, while it is greater and more powerful than your pops, it will be weaker than that of Ryujin Zaka. That explains the short temper you used to have. Ichigo nodded, looking at Ao, who looked away with a blush, but nodded nonetheless. I guess beating me to death was one way to let loose of your frustrations, huh? Sorry about that. He smiled apologetically at Ao. The kid sure is close to his Zanpakuto spirits. He'll be a fearsome opponent in the future, he thought, and then widely smirked. A mere kid is going to take your title, Yamamoto. Get ready for the storm named Shiba Kurosaki. Ichigo. Well, now what? Ichigo asked. Isn't it obvious? We'll get down to forging them, the man said as he set up a slide and kicked Ichigo and 3 Zanpakuto spirits into the deeper part of the palace and summoned his bodyguards to prepare the forge for him and tied his hair back while removing the sunglasses. Nera-chan, do you remember how I forged her? He asked as he led the 3 spirits towards a group of girls were present along with Mira. You do know that she can't be sheathed in anything but that gel? Mira asked, to which she got a crazy grin. We'll be busy for a while, my dear Mira-chan. As for you, Ichigo-chan, I'll summon you when you'll be needed to put the final touch. I'll be needed for the final touch? Ichigo asked, confused. Your Ryatsu signature is the final component. So, see you to tomorrow, he said before he suddenly launched Ichigo to Shutara's palace. So you've finally come, came Shutara's voice from behind him as he lied on the ground panting. That fool always does something like this. She sighed before saying, come now, young one. I need your measurements to make you a new wardrobe, she said as she walked away with Ichigo in tow. Why does everyone walk away when they're done talking to, commanding me? The next day Ichigo arrived at Otsu's forging place and saw the man smirking at him. The man gave him 3 crystal spheres and said, use 2 for your Shinigami Zanpakuto while the other 1 for your hollow Zanpakuto. Pour your Ryatsu into them to the brim and give them to me. Ichigo did as instructed and started pouring Ryatsu into each. The first glowed reddish-orange with blue tints. Then an idea came to his head and he poured his Quincy Ryatsu into it, not without the consolation of his spirits. The now reddish-orange sphere had blue circuit patterns surrounding the sphere. He repeated the same with the second one. It glowed bluish-white, and at the end, the same but brighter circuit patterns appeared. When he put his hollow Ryatsu into the last one, it glowed white with red tints. However, the circuit patterns were black instead of blue. Ichigo asked why, and spirits told him that it was due to hollow and Quincy Ryatsu forcefully mixing. With the task done, he handed the 3 spheres over to Otsu, who just raised an eyebrow and dropped the 3 in 3 different forge. And after that, explosions of reddish-orange, bluish-white and red-tinted white Ryatsu occurred, throwing all of them back. When the force let up, Mira brought 3 identical hilts and handed it to Otsu. Otsu simply dipped them guard first and let them float. After a while he pulled them out and presented 3 glowing katanas in a line. The left and the middle ones are your Shinigami Zanpakuto AMD, the one on the right is your hollow Zanpakuto. Now then, let's see the changes, shall we? Otsu got a confused look from Ichigo and sighed. Grab them and put your own soul into them, he simply ordered. Ichigo nodded and picked up the 2 Shinigami Zanpakuto and focused on them. The 2 katanas were covered in white flash of light before revealing themselves in their new appearance. Both of them had guards that appeared to be 5-pointed cross inside a circle. The one on his left hand was bluish-white while the one on the right was reddish-orange. The hilt of the one on the left had blue wrappings with white diamonds and a white tassel dangling on the butt end of the hilt. The hilt of the right one had red wrappings with orange diamonds and an orange tassel dangling off of it. As for the blade, it was longer than a katana but shorter than a nadachi, around 80 centimeters, and had lesser curve as well. A hollowed-out portion was existent from the base of the blade to a few inches away from the tip. The blade, like all others, was silver but glinted blue and reddish-orange whenever light reflected off of its edges. He observed the 2 with wonder in his eyes and the release commands in his mind. One for fire and the other for ice. Akane was the one of fire while the newly Shiao was ice. Good. Move on to the next one, Otsu said as he handed Ichigo 2 sheaths, blue and red. He stored Akane in the red hole, was put in the blue one. He then turned to the remaining single Zanpakuto and grabbed it, with the same process happening again. The Zanpakuto was now revealed to have a ocean blue 5-pointed star in a circle guard. The hilt had white wrappings and the diamonds were blue with a blue chain of a length of a foot dangled. The blade was bone white and straight with the same length as that of the other 2. He was then handed a white sheath which had blue chains wrapped around it. When he sheathed the Zanpakuto, the chains of the sheath and hilt linked together with a snap. Ichigo then noticed that all 3 had the same guard and they looked exactly like a Quincy cross. Sensing his confusion, Juha said, "The 3 Zanpakutos now are a Shinigami Quincy and hollow Quincy hybrids. You'll be able to use Blut to enhance your sharpness and offensive prowess, or the defensive, making it harder for the opponents to win a stalemate." Ichigo nodded, happy of such convenience. "Well now, those are pretty great Zanpakutos you got there, and therefore go to IchiHime, who will give the name of their Shikai and Bankai," Otsu said as he launched Ichigo up again now towards IchiHime's palace to properly start training as well as getting the names. Ichigo in his flight to IchiHime's had a short conversation with his Zanpakuto spirits. They said that there were slight changes, barely noticeable, but present nonetheless. He was excited to see their new form and raced to IchiHime as soon as he landed. When he reached the man in question, he had given the Zanpakutos to the man to name them. The man shook his head in amusement seeing how excited the teen was and got down to thinking of a proper name. When he was relayed information about the Zanpakutos, he racked his brain and finally got down to name them. "Done. Try releasing their Shikai," IchiHime said as he handed over the 3 Zanpakutos to Ichigo's hands. He saw in amazement how Ichigo inserted the hollow Zanpakuto into a void that appeared out of nowhere on his left. He shook his head at the enigma that is Shiba Kurosaki Ichigo. Ichigo, on the other hand, stood in the center of the dojo and held out his sealed Zanpakutos. Right crossed over left in a reverse grip pointed downwards, while the left was pointed upwards yet diagonally. Ignite and disintegrate. Turn white and solidify. Getsu no Hikori. With an explosion of fire, the blades glowed brightly and slowly started morphing and taking new shape. When the fire and light died, it revealed Ichigo holding 2 massive kyber knives nearly as big as him. Half of the blade was obsidian black while the other was white instead of silver. In the division of the 2 colors ran a thin and long hollowed-out portion near the back edge of the blade, starting at the base of the blade to a few inches before the tip of the blade. From the hollowed-out portions, there were flames of reddish-orange licking across the dull surface covering the black part of the blade, revealing little of said part. The most eye-catching part were the barely visible yet glowing blue circuit patterns that ran throughout the whole blade horizontally and vertically crisscrossing over each other. The blade had a handle that was the length of Ichigo's forearm, covered in white cloth that burned with blue flames, not affecting Ichigo in the slightest. The grip between the base of the blade and handle had only little space for a single hand to be held in instead of two. So these are the changes you guys were talking about. And the circuit patterns are the blunt, I suppose? Ichigo asked, to which he got a hum of affirmation from the spirits. But this is the fire half. What about my ice half? Ichigo asked, to which he was shot dry looks from Ao and Akka. They sighed and pinched his soul in a way that gave him the command to switch elements. Shelton, as he said that, the fire vanished, replaced by ice. The heat was gone and now cold took its place. The flames licking the back surface of the blade were gone, replaced with white ice stuck across the back edge of the blade starting from the hollowed out portion. The circuit patterns were the same in color, glowing dimly. IchiHime, on the other hand, was impressed. When Ichigo released his Zanpakuto, he tapped into the fire element first, and the explosion followed by the release command completely scorched the wooden platform on the dojo, along with several parts cracked and turned to dust. The heat was a lot. It was on par with Ryujin jacket, yet a far cry from Zanka no Takai. And when the kid tapped into the ice element, the whole area's temperature dropped several degrees, even more so than higher in Maru. The Zanpakuto was exactly worthy of the release phrase. Ignite and disintegrate showed the part where fire exploded and turned white, and solidify showed up at the drop in temperature, and in white ice that covered the back edge of the blade. It was truly a rare and special Zanpakuto, one that will never show up again in the future, nor did it in the past. IchiHime was looking forward to the Bankai, even though he had an idea of what it'd end up as. Chapter 5. Enter the Shinigami. Ichigo stepped out of the Senkamen into the familiar grounds of Kisuke's underground training basement. Casting out his senses, he noticed that nearly everyone in the town has fallen asleep. Well, Kisuke wasn't, so why not greet the man? Ichigo's training surprisingly took only a year to complete. He had achieved Bankai and Segunda atop both and mastered them. He was now able to cast Hado and Bakuto up to 99 without incantation. Training under the Squad Zero lunatics, he stood on the same level as them. He was sure that he could best Yoruichi in a game of tag and outclass Kisuke in Zenjutsu. Ichigo stealthily climbed the ladder up and peeked into the living room to see Kisuke absent-mindedly petting Yoruichi while fanning himself, all the while lying on his side. He grinned widely, and with a loud sound he slammed open the slightly open sliding door and yelled, "I quote him back." He got his desired reaction of Kisuke jumping high, colliding with the ceiling, with Yoruichi and her cat form flying and hitting a wall far left of Ichigo. Living with the eccentric squad has changed him a bit as well. He picked up on a few habits of theirs and made them realize how eccentric the squad was. Kisuke immediately spun with his Zanpakuto out of the cane, aiming at Ichigo's neck, only to stop a mere inch from cutting the boy's head off of his shoulder. Kisuke sighed and fell limp on the floor on his back, seeing as it wasn't an enemy but his very own protege. Yoruichi transformed and immediately latched herself to him, completely forgetting his prank, and squeezed him hard. Like usual, she latched herself to him for good, with her limbs around his neck and waist, with her melons pressed to his back. "You're back," she screamed and hugged him from her position. "Look at you, grown up so manly. And your ass." She trailed off as she got a feel of said ass, causing Ichigo to yelp. Then she pouted, "But your cuteness is gone." "Why? Oh, why did it have to go? You were so cute back then, skin so soft and squishy. Smooth." She continued on and on, all the while drooling with a blush on her face. She felt hot and bothered, and thus her hold became loose, causing her to fall on her butt, and yet she continued rambling. While Yoruichi was having her fun, Kisuke took in Ichigo's new appearance. His hair was longer and tied into a ponytail at the neck. He wore a variation of the Shinigami garb, with its sleeves being marked with small diamonds and spheres of golden yellow color. Single trim lines on each sleeve started from two spheres, one on top and other from bottom, and joined together on the shoulder up to the collar. The hem of his hakama was marked with thin and long vertical kites that reached slightly above his calves. The obi was also golden yellow. The most shocking addition was the Hikori. It was also a variation, but a Hikori nonetheless. It had two shoulder pads colored black with golden scales and extended outwards to form an X above the chest before joining with the Hikori again at the hip. At the center point of the X, he noticed, was his Quincy cross. The diamonds and spheres on the hem of the Hikori were royal purple, and the sides of the Hikori were marked with three slim trim lines of royal purple. "So you've been made a member of Squad 0A?" Kisuke asked, prompting Yoruichi to start wailing as she latched herself to Ichigo again. "NOOO, I knew they would keep you for themselves. Those bastards. I quote LL, kill them." "Calm down. That's not it, Ichigo said, immediately stopping Yoruichi and snatching both of her and Kisuke's attention. They aren't keeping me for themselves. And yes, I'm a member of that squad, but my station will be Karakura town. So, can I jump you now? Yoruichi asked innocently, only to be smirked in return. Only if you can beat me in tag tomorrow. Now I'll have to go home before everyone falls asleep. See you tomorrow, Kitty-chan, he said, sending pleasant shivers down Yoruichi's spine while dropping her to the floor not so gently on her bum, and was gone in a flash, leaving a nearly solid afterimage. Yoruichi stared wide-eyed at the slowly fading afterimage of her love interest. She turned to Kisuke to see him watching the same thing, but deep in thought, with the hat shadowing his eyes and the fan covering his lower face. Shady bastard, she thought with a scowl as she huffed and transformed into her cat form before proceeding to sleep. Yoruichi's dream will be squashed tomorrow, haha. Kisuke giggled creepily to himself, excited to see Yoruichi's face at her defeat. God, I'm starting to act like Mayuri. Ichigo in a single flash step stood before his home and sent a pulse of Ryatsu to sense who was present. He sighed in relief when he didn't find Tatsuki, because as far as he knew, she frequented his house a lot. He knocked on the door and was met by Yuzu, who stood frozen in her place at the sight of her beloved big brother. Ichigo spread out his arms and caught Yuzu as she cried out, "IchiHime." She then proceeded to squeeze the life out of her brother, not willing to let him go. Seeing as Yuzu won't release him, he smiled and walked into the house to meet the shocked gazes of his family. Karin stood up and stopped before him, taking in his new form before punching him in the gut, only to wince in slight pain. "Welcome home," she said before hugging him. Ichigo noticed Karin's wince, but he knew she was strong, so he pretended not to see it and returned her hug. The trio was then joined by IchiHime. They all heard a click sound followed after a flash of light. They released themselves and saw Isshin smiling at them with the camera in his hand. Ichigo briefly wondered when the man brought the camera, but knowing him, he immediately dropped that line of thought. The siblings released themselves from the group embrace, with Yuzu reluctantly doing so. Isshin, noticing the special get-up, asked, "So an officer of Squad 0, huh?" He got a somewhat superior smirk from his son that caused him to feel inferior, and thus got into a father-son all-out brawl. The other three siblings watched the scene with a fond smile. Well, a scowl in Karin's case. The victor of the brawl, as expected, was Ichigo. "I'll be stationed in Karakura town until further notice," he said as he sat down on one of the chairs and watched his father pull his beaten and bruised body on a chair before slumping forward on the table. "Good for you," Isshin said, and then remembered something. "Do you plan on going to the Soul Society anytime soon?" He got a why from Ichigo and proceeded. "Yoruichi told me that since my departure into the world of the living, the once proud Shiba clan has fallen from the noble ranks. So I'd like you to return it back to its former glory should you ever visit Soul Society. Can you do that?" Ichigo shrugged and said, "Why not? As a royal guard, I hold more power in my hands than Central 46 and Godai 13 combined." He got a wide-eyed look from his father, who then smirked at his son. "That would mean you're Yamajai's senior officer, right?" Isshin asked with a smirk, only to get one in return. Having answered his father, he turned back to listen to his sisters and heard their stories with a fond smile. The next day he head out to Kisuke's shop to be the victor of his game of tag with Yoruichi. On his way, he sent a text to Uryu telling him that he was back in town and asked how far he'd progressed. He didn't get a reply yet, so he sent another telling that he was at Kisuke's playing a game of tag with Yoruichi. With his texting done, he reached the shop and knocked on the door. It opened and revealed Tessai. "Welcome back, Ichigo Dono," he greeted as he made way for Ichigo. "They're waiting below," the man said as he went back to the kitchen. With a nod, Ichigo went off and jumped down the ladder into the basement and found Kisuke on a boulder and Yoruichi stretching. "Yo, let's do this," he said as he reached the two. Yoruichi smirked and said, "How about we up the ante? Every time each of us gets tagged, we remove a piece of clothing. How about it?" She got a broad grin in return. "Sure, get ready to lose. Don't cry when you do," Ichigo said, getting a smirk and a raised eyebrow from her. "Okay, now that the contestants are present, let's begin in 3. Kisuke said from his position on the boulder. "On your marks, 1, 2, and 3. Yoruichi immediately flashed at full speed and reached to tap Ichigo, only to have her hand pass through him. She was tapped on her shoulder and turned her head just in time to see Ichigo smirking behind her as he vanished again, leaving multiple clones of himself along the way as he kept on moving. "He's fast," she thought as she gave chase after dropping her orange vest following Ichigo's trail of clones. She concluded that he did this to make it easier for her to track him down. Knowing that she won't be able to catch him without Shunko, she unleashed it and flashed out of existence in full speed. She was able to reach Ichigo just in time to miss him by a hair's length. With a cry, she blasted off towards him, fully intent on hitting him. She threw thunderbolts at him with her fists, and soon, the game of tag became a game of Hakuta and Ho-Ho. Kisuke sighed and shook his head as the fight went on for hours and felt the tremors and the quakes produced each time they hit each other. What has this turned into? He thought just in time for both of them to appear. Yoruichi was fully naked, sweat glistening off her skin as she panted, while Ichigo had his pants on with his t-shirt gone. Both had a few bruises here and there, but Yoruichi more so than him. Damn Berry, Yoruichi panted out. You've gotten way too fast. At least 3 times faster than me. She then noticed Kisuke radiating smugness. What? Kisuke closed his fan with a snap and said, well, I predicted that you'd lose and look how it turned out. Karma, eh? Yoruichi growled while Ichigo shook his head in amusement. So how far have you come in the last year? Kisuke asked, wanting to know more about his protege. I did achieve Bankai and Segunda Etapa. Learned Kaido up to the 90 seconds. Why? Show me then how much you've improved in the last year. With that, Kisuke launched himself at Ichigo with his Zanpakuto only to meet Ichigo's own. He was surprised with the speed Ichigo pulled out his Zanpakuto from the 2 voids and blocked his strike without moving an inch. Why not? Ichigo said, getting serious. Kisuke and Ichigo soon met each other in a fury of slashes. Dodge, parry, slice, flip and slide, stab, dodge. This continued on for a few minutes before both reached a stalemate, which with a grunt was broken by Ichigo, who didn't miss a chance and aimed a cut for the annoying hat. Hey, that's my hat you're aiming for. Exactly. They continued on for a while before falling into another stalemate, which was broken by Kisuke back-flipping, causing Ichigo to stumble forward before he got a hold of himself. Let's get into Shikai, shall we? Kisuke said, to which he got a smirk. Sure, why not? Ignite and disintegrate. Turn white and solidify. Getsu no Hikori. Divided by awaken, Benayam. Both yelled together, releasing their respective Shikais. While Kisuke's Zanpakuto smoothly took its Shikai form, Ichigo's one wasn't smooth. Fire exploded bigger than Kisuke remembered, and 2 bright flashes of light took place in the fire sphere, where 2 large glowing kyber knives could be seen. In fact, the explosion was so big that Kisuke not only did he had to jump away, he even had to use Blood Mist Shield to protect himself. The ground around Ichigo cracked and charred with a crater of radius 20 feet. Kisuke's eyes widened when he saw the familiar yet unfamiliar kyber knives in Ichigo's hands. The last time he saw them, the blades were purely silver and the flames on the right one were reddish-orange while the left one had blue flames. But now, the blades were now half black and half bone white with faint but barely visible blue circuit patterns running vertically and horizontally crisscrossing each other. Both blades gave off reddish-orange flame with clearly visible blue highlights. Ichigo smirked at the gobsmacked reactions of both Yoruichi and Kisuke. He vanished as soon as he saw Kisuke refocus on him with his guard up. Ichigo directly appeared above the scientist and swung down his left blade in an overhead swing and brought the right blade in a horizontal slash as soon as his left one was blocked. Kisuke had to use both of his arms to block Ichigo's swing, and a crater formed around him because of the force behind the strike. Noticing the second blade rapidly approaching, he twisted his body and narrowly avoided being cut down in half. That's dangerous, he thought, amazed by the changes of Ichigo's Zanpakuto and its increased power. He then backed away and released an arc of crimson energy at Ichigo. Nake, Benayam. Ichigo simply swatted away the attack as he reared his right blade back and charged flames and swung at Kisuke. Nenshu Getsuga. Flames in the form of an arc raged towards Kisuke at a rapid speed towards Kisuke, who instantly summoned Blood Mist Shield and protected himself. When the flames died down, Kisuke smiled and said, Shibari, Benayam. Condensed energy in the form of tangible red net tried to wrap around Ichigo only for them to be burnt away. Ichigo pointed his right blade at Kisuke and said, Sauron Saukatsui. Blue flames rushed at him in the form of tornado and tried hitting Kisuke, who shunpoed at the last second to avoid the hot blue flames, so he can infuse his element into Kaido. Kisuke thought as he prepared himself for one final attack. Both of them nodded and charged their Zanpakuto and leaped toward each other. While Kisuke brought his sword behind, completely charging the blade with energy, Ichigo crossed his blades above his head and completely encased them in fire. Nenshu Getsuga Jujishu. Kamisori, Benayam. Cross-shaped flames collided with red energy, creating an explosion, throwing up dust and debris everywhere. Eventually, a few minutes later, the dust cleared off, showing a slightly injured Ichigo panting and Kisuke on the ground, hat burnt to dust. Yoruichi was blown off to a deeper part of the basement due to the explosion. MIH hat sniff. How cruel. After he went home from the sparring session, he encountered a group of fools who had knocked over the flower vase of a girl's soul. He had dealt with them quite efficiently, which entertained the girl quite a bit. He had asked her if she'd want to move on to the afterlife. She said that she'd stick around for a bit and then approach him. So he warned her of the dangers regarding the hollows, to which she promised to be careful and find him or any other Shinigami nearby to console her. Later, when he returned home, he and his father had another session of brawl with the old man lying on the floor. After dinner, when he returned to his room, he opened his door just in time to see a female Shinigami get out of the wall of his study desk. IchiHime was below helping Yuzu in the kitchen. In his absence, Yuzu had taken his place and was adamant about keeping it. She also said that his job might keep him busy often, so he should rest and focus on schoolwork as much as possible. He took in the appearance of the Shinigami. She was short with black shoulder-length hair and a pair of purple eyes that reminded him of Yoruichi's hair. He pretended not to see her and sat on his bed with a book, keeping up the act, but kept an eye on her. "It should be here," she muttered. Ichigo rose an eyebrow, guessing that it was a hollow she was taking about, and sent a pulse of Ryatsu to scan the neighborhood. As soon as he sensed a presence, he jumped off of his bed, startling the female Shinigami, and went downstairs. With a sequence of claps and whistle, he notified them of an approaching hollow. They nodded and immediately rushed to their rooms, leaving the father-son duo there. The Shinigami silently came down the stairs and observed the two. She has a feeling that she knew the older man, or at least had seen him before, but couldn't put a name to the face. Her eyes widened when she properly looked at Ichigo and compared him to Kayan. They both looked the same, bar the hair and eye color. She noticed the two tense and wondered what the matter was, but got her answer when the wall of the house burst open, revealing an arm. She then saw the two jump and take cover in the kitchen. Her device beeped rapidly, notifying her that approximately 6 hollows had surrounded the house. She rushed out through the broken wall and looked at hollows. The first one looked like a hybrid of a human and fish, while the second one looked like a bear, except it had black skin, a hole in its stomach, and a white bone mask. The third one appeared to be a bird, and the fourth one looked like a humanoid lizard. The fifth one was the largest, as it was towering above all of them, nearly as tall as the house was, and looked like a buffalo. The last one was the strongest, and she had a suspicion that it was the fastest as well, as it looked like a panther of sorts with green skin and blue lines and the same white bone mask. She guessed that it was the leader. With a sigh, she unsheathed her Zanpakuto and released it, knowing that without her Shikai she won't last long. Dance, Sode no Shirayuki. She her Zanpakuto out in front of her and turned it in a circle counterclockwise. While she turned it, the blade, hilt, and tsuba turned completely white. The tsuba became a hollow snowflake-like circle, and a white ribbon formed from the pommel. Tsugi no Mai, Hakuren. Calling out the name of the dance, Rukia punctured the ground once, creating a large ice circle, before puncturing the ground in front of her 4 times in a semicircle. As the ice particles began to flow up from the punctures she made in the ground, Rukia took a battle stance. Building up at the tip of Sode no Shirayuki, the ice particles are released as a powerful large avalanche of cold air, which flash froze the first and second hollow, encasing them in ice and shattering them. Some no Mai, Tsukishiro. Ice rose up vertically. AMD caught the bird-like hollow by its wings. The frozen wings shattered and the hollow howled in pain. Seeing one after one hollows come down, the panther-like hollow jumped at the unguarded back of the Shinigami, fully intent on maiming her. The Shinigami's eyes widened as she realized that she won't make it. Even still, she tried to get out of the way, but the humanoid lizard-like hollow wrapped her in its tail and slammed her on the ground, making it easier for the panther hollow to lounge at her. Time seemed to slow down for her as she looked on at the approaching hollows, wholly set on devouring her. So this is how it ends, she thought as she gave up and closed her eyes, accepting her death. Forgive me, Nai-sama. She waited for her imminent death, but suddenly found herself free, loose, and heard roars of pain and agony. She opened her eyes just in time to see the orange-haired boy pull out his arm from the panther hollow before jumping and punching the biggest one. Then he proceeded to grab the lizard hollow by its tail and swung it around in circles before throwing it skywards, and as it neared him, he roundhouse kicked the hollow, effectively crushing the mask. She looked on astonished at the human that defeated 3 hollows barehanded. "Yo, samurai lady," Ichigo's voice called out to her, snapping her out of her reverie. "With a powerful and beautiful sword like that, how come you weren't able to defeat these things?" Ichigo decided to pretend not to know what she was. "You look pretty ganged up," he grunted as he carried her in her bridal style with her sword above her and entered the clinic where his father was waiting. While he was doing this, he noticed that the samurai lady was looking at him with wide eyes and a blush on her face, too weak to resist his help. He put her down on a bed and let his father check up on her. She winced in pain as Isshin treated her wounds and cleaned them up. He asked Ichigo to call IchiHime and have her change Rukia into a patient's gown. She shook her head and said, "Wait, you guys can see me." She got a dry look from the father-son duo. IchiHime stood by in attention watching the events unfold. "About damn time," Ichigo grumbled from his position. "Kurosaki Ichigo." He introduced himself with a nod encouraging her to do the same. She sputtered and said, "Kuchiki Rukia, Shinigami, Kurosaki Isshin, father of the Carrot Top and angels over there." Isshin introduced himself as he pointed at the siblings talking among themselves. "What was that about being able to see you?" Ichigo asked, continuing to pretend being a normal human and ignoring the jab by his father. "I'm a Shinigami, a soul sent from the afterlife named Soul Society to deal with the hollows and protect the humans and help souls pass on to the afterlife." She got nods from Isshin and Ichigo. They seemed to be taking this rather well. "Well, you've been severely wounded, so I suggest that you rest here for the night." She nodded at Isshin and closed her eyes waiting for the darkness that would take her to a world full of her chappy toys. Seeing Rukia sleep, the father-son duo sat at the dining table. "Of all the people, a Kuchiki," Isshin sighed. "A noble clan looking after the libraries and history of Soul Society," Ichigo said, getting a nod from Isshin. "Anything wrong with her being a Kuchiki?" Isshin shook his head. He knew the event between her and Kayan. He was actually grateful to her. If she hadn't done what she did, who knows what would have happened. Her brother though, a stone-cold bastard with a stick deep in his ass, Ichigo asked. Isshin snorted and nodded. "Though I wouldn't blame the guy. He's been like that since his wife died and the stone-cold attitude is in their blood. His grandfather was like that as well, albeit less cold. He hasn't been able to move on, it seems," Ichigo said and again got a nod. "Let's turn in for the night. I have a feeling she wouldn't be here in the morning." With a nod, both of them went to their respective rooms to sleep. Just as he expected, Rukia wasn't in the clinic next morning when he went to check up on her. She left a note thanking them for their hospitality. He greeted his sisters, two of which were in the kitchen while the other was watching TV. He plopped down beside Karin and waited patiently for either of the cooks to call out. Soon he found himself sitting on the chair beside IchiHime eating breakfast. After eating breakfast, the older siblings were out walking out towards the school talking about schoolwork. As soon as he stepped foot past the gate, he felt himself being watched. He kept on walking and sent a pulse of Ryatsu to sense who it was. It was the Shinigami from last night, Kuchiki Rukia. So she's keeping tabs on me. Who wouldn't after seeing a human take down something that was their job to do so? Seeing Ichigo's scowl on his face, IchiHime asked what was wrong. He told her about his stalker, to which she giggled. They went to the classroom and took their seat greeting their friends. Ichigo had transferred into Karakura High and found his student, friend, cousin Ishida Uryu. The two celebrated their reunion with a spar between themselves. Of course he won and he was pleased to see Uryu's progress. He was sure Uryu wouldn't have much trouble fighting a low-tier lieutenant. The two of them chatted for a while and both talked about what they did in each other's absence. He was brought back from his thoughts when the teacher, Miss Ochai, stepped into the classroom. Miss Ochai coughed in her hands and spoke up. "Listen up. We're having another transfer student into our class. You can come in." The door opened up to reveal Kuchiki Rukia in all her glory, wearing the standard Karakura High uniform with a fake cheerful smile plastered on her face. She waved at them as she stood on the podium and said, "Hi there. I'm Kuchiki Rukia. Pleased to meet you." She ended with a bow. As she was told to take a seat behind Ichigo, she showed her palm to him, which showed, "Make a scene and you're so dead." Ichigo briefly caught Uryu's gaze and nodded, indicating that he'd look after the situation. He turned and smirked evilly at her as she took her seat, sending shivers down her spine. Her mask almost broke, keyword being almost. Though judging by the glint in his eyes, she could tell that he noticed. When lunch came, Rukia created quite the commotion and pulled Ichigo to the rooftop to chat privately. This caused Keigo to cry on the floor, begging Ichigo to teach him how to charm a woman. Ichigo kicked him in the face and left after Rukia. Now the two of them stayed in each other's presence on the rooftop, not minding the silence which not unexpectedly was broken by Rukia. "How did you kill those 3 hollows I had problem dealing with? How can you jump so high? Wait, don't tell me you're a mod soul." Rukia again nearly lost her composure at the mention of mod souls, and from the corner of her eyes she saw him smirking at her. "I just did." He shrugged. Rukia gave him a dry look before opening her mouth to ask something, only to be beaten down to it by Ichigo. "Why are you here?" Ichigo asked, facial expression changing from scowl to neutral face of a commander. "You're probably here to observe and stalk me, aren't you? Soul Society doesn't know yet, but they will soon enough. I'll keep my promise to you." Ichigo nodded before finishing lunch with her. He poked fun at her when she had problems opening the juice box. If she had been a tad more observant, she would have seen the pendant dangling from Ichigo's right wrist. Alternate Universe. Chapter 1 Return of his Nightmare. Ichigo was sure that his life will get worse. Why? It's rather simple. His childhood nightmare was returning back from abroad, and on top of that, said nightmare will be living with him in the same room. His life will no longer be as peaceful as it was since his nightmare's departure. He groaned as he walked towards school. His father told him after his daily morning assault that he'll be seeing his nightmare in school. He was considering leaving the town, but his nightmare was adamant in staying with him and would have followed him wherever he went. I'm sure it's the promise we made to each other. He was so absorbed in his dreadful thoughts that he didn't even notice his friends calling out to him. His friends shared a concerned glance among each other and decided to ask what the matter was. Oi Ichigo. A black-haired girl called out to him from behind, making him jump in shock. OOT Tatsuki. Warning, hehe. Ichigo trailed off, running the back of his head with a sheepish laugh. Tatsuki scowled and asked, what the hell is wrong with you? You ignored us when we tried to talk with you. Ichigo apologized and with a pale yet serious face said, you'll find out in class today. He shuddered and rubbed his arms to get rid of the goosebumps. Tatsuki frowned but said nothing. The group then walked towards their class, completely oblivious of the figure observing them from afar. I found you, the figure whispered in a sing-song voice. XXX. Ichigo kept his guard up the whole time in class, glancing from side to side and then looking out of the window. His behavior worried his friends, and every time IchiHime asked if something was wrong, he brushed her off, saying that he was fine. IchiHime pouted as she returned to her seat, wondering what kept her best friend so on guard. Alright class, settle down. We're having a new student in our class, so be on your best behavior, Miss Ochai said as she stood behind the teacher's desk and waited for the class to calm down. You may come in. Oh god no, Ichigo thought as he trembled in his seat, completely pale with his eyes wide. The door opened to reveal a female student in the standard Karakura high uniform. She was short and petite with short black hair and a bob cut and had violet eyes. She stood beside the teacher and smiled at the class in a way that lightened up the room. Hi there, I'm Kuchiki Rukia. Pleased to meet you. She ended with a bow and then flashed a smile at Ichigo. Tatsuki turned pale as well and looked at Ichigo, finally realizing why he was so tense. Ichigo stood up with his hands on his head and screamed to the whole world. NOOO. To be continued. Chapter 6. See you on the other side. It was raining. It always did. On this same day every year it rained. As a kid he loved the rain, but since that night he hated it. The rain reminded him of that night, the night his world came crashing down. The night his world lost its sun. And now, the very reason for his world's loss was in front of him, panting and healing from the superficial wounds he gave to it and purpose giving into his inner sadist. Grand Fissure, a hollow that has been escaping the Shinigami for years, had taken away his world's sun. That very same hollow dared to take his sisters away from him on the very same day it took away his mother. He was a bit late but was able to rescue his sisters in time. IchiHime and Isshin had then taken his twin sisters away from the fight which he had been dominating from the start. Though when he was sure that his family was out of range, he let out his inner self. Instead of glaring at the hollow with hatred, he smiled at it so sweetly that the hollow was forced to take a step away from him. The two had a bit of reminiscing of that night, all the while Ichigo had that sweet smile that screamed of pain unlike any other. Every time the hollow missed its target, Ichigo would then sadistically taunt it. Ichigo could have ended the fight with one arrow, but he didn't. No, he wanted to torture the hollow. For that reason alone, he had set up a barrier, the one of the Quincy, which prevented the flow of Ryatsu of the inside to the outside. Which was why Rukia was absent and unaware of a hollow. Speaking of Rukia, the two had gotten closer over the weeks. She stayed with the Kurosaki family in their guest room where Ichigo slept whenever Tatsuki slept over. Ichigo was brought out of his thoughts when a tendril of fur tried impaling him. He jumped and dodged the incoming tendrils and shot a few arrows and returned successfully, hitting his mark. Arrows which were dodged by the hollow were then maneuvered to hit the hollow in the back. Getting frustrated, the hollow decided to use its trump card, one that always caught his targets off guard. He then created the doll of a very dead Masaki Kurosaki in order to catch his food off guard. Oh, how wrong he was. How's that, brat? What will you do now? Hahaha. Let's see how YHHH. Before the hollow could finish, the doll of Masaki Kurosaki was blasted with an arrow. As the hollow stopped howling in pain, it glared at Ichigo. You know what? You're no fun. How about I finish you off right here and now? Ichigo said as he smiled much more sadistically and created a very dense risey arrow and aimed at the mask. The arrow was so dense that the small area around it was distorting rapidly. Fortunately, due to the rain, the hollow didn't notice. Do you really think that weak arrow can harm me? Let's see if this one works, shall we? Ichigo asked with the same sweet sadistic smile on his face. Before the hollow could finish, it was blasted to pieces. Ichigo sighed and looked at the sky as the rain slowed down. The guilt which he had buried deep inside of him had resurfaced again at the sight of Grand Fisher was now gone. Rest in peace, Mom. With a mental command, he put down the barrier and joined his family. Ichigo woke up the next day with groggy eyes. He looked down to see the bed empty, meaning that IchiHime had already woken up and was preparing breakfast with Yuzu. He stepped out of his room and went to freshen up. He greeted Rukia as she came out of the bathroom. For some reason he had that nagging feeling that something stupid was about to happen today. He brushed it off and brushed his teeth. After he was done, he went into his room and changed into his school uniform. He got down the stairs and ducked as his father went flying over him and hit the wall. He kicked his father on the back of his head to make sure that the man-child doesn't bother him again. He sat down on the dining table beside IchiHime with Rukia opposite to the man-child. The group ate in comfortable silence, which was broken by Rukia, something Ichigo was expecting. So, did you encounter any hollows yesterday? Ichigo nodded and said it was a small fry. A punch followed by a heel drop was enough to kill it. He lied. Ichigo often had to deal with hollows now and then whenever Rukia wasn't around him, so she asked if he had dealt with any. I see. Sorry, I wasn't there to deal with it. Rukia bowed her head lightly only to be smacked by Ichigo. Stop bowing, you damn chappy addicted midget. You were probably busy dealing with another hollow, so it's fine. The midget part sparked a fire in her and thus her daily verbal fight with Ichigo began. They kept at it till they reached the school gate where she had shifted back to her facade, much to the amusement of IchiHime and irritation of Ichigo. The trio greeted their friends and got into their class. Ichigo raised an eyebrow when Uryu smirked at him with a mischievous glint. He then remembered the pencil's intention and smirked back in return. The duo's interaction wasn't gone unnoticed by Rukia, who narrowed her eyes in suspicion. She knew that the pencil was a Quincy, and for the two of them to act like they knew something unnerved her. It unnerved her even more when Ichigo wiggled his eyebrows at her with an annoying smirk. What are they planning? Rukia was right. The Carrot Top and Pencil were planning something. The Pencil suddenly approached the two as they headed towards home, proposing that a competition be held to decide who's best, a Shinigami or a Quincy. Before she could even reply, Uryu had crushed the hollow bait, and thus called in countless hollows. With a quick "see-you," the Quincy was gone, rapidly firing arrows and taking down hollows. She quickly jumped into action, releasing her Shikai right off the bat, freezing hollows here and there, raising her count. All the while Ichigo looked on from the rooftop of a random building. Since he had a considerable amount of Ryatsu, Rukia had been teaching him Kaido to protect himself. She taught him Byakurai, Shikaho, Aokasen and Saokatsuki from the Hado group, while from the Bakudo group, she taught him Sai, Heinawa, Seki and Sekienten. Rukia knew what she did was a crime, but Ichigo said that he'd keep this fact a secret in exchange for her not spilling his secret of having crushed the hollows like normal thugs. She sighed in relief, but soon she had a bad feeling that she'd be found out. Not by Ichigo, but Soul Society would find out, and by that she'd endanger both her and his lives. She taught him out of impulse, but she realized her mistake later on once he was done properly learning the spells. But she had suspicions as to how Ichigo was able to grasp the knowledge about the spells so easily. She wasn't so sure what to make of the enigma that is Kurosaki Ichigo. She shook her head and focused on the competition, determined to prove that Shinigami are the best. While the two were focusing on slaying the hollows, Ichigo pulled out a file named Kuchiki Rukia and noted down her prowess and skills. He'd sensed her going to his school and saved the students from a hollow that nearly controlled every student there. Luckily, neither Tatsuki nor IchiHime were there. So far he was content with her progress, even though it was a given that Uryu would win the competition. The guy had learnt manipulation so well that he could control a dense arrow and maneuver it to kill multiple hollows in series. He was kind of glad that the competition was being held, since he was now properly able to judge the power levels of the two. As he noted down the report on Rukia, he absent-mindedly threw a Byakurai at a hollow over his shoulder. He chuckled at the hollow's failed attempt at stealth. He sighed as he put down the pen and closed the file, putting it back into the void that appeared beside him. He smirked when he saw the tear and sky spread out and become larger due to two white hands sticking out. Soon after followed the head and body to reveal Amino's grand in all its glory. Let's see how she reacts to this threat. Both Rukia and Uryu met at the same place once they were done hunting the hollows. Now, with all of them gone, they decided to share how many they killed. I killed 695 hollows. How about you, Kuchiki-san? Uryu asked as he slightly glanced at the amused Ichigo who was looking up at the sky. Rukia was panting with her hands on her knees and head bowed as she gulped air, thankfully hiding her shock. I killed 304 hollows. There was silence, which was then broken down by the heavy footsteps of Mino's Grand. Both of them looked wide-eyed as the hollow headed towards them. Uryu summoned his bow and faced the approaching hollow. Rukia, on the other hand, nearly panicked. She calmed down and then reminded herself that the place was empty of life. She then looked at the Quincy and then asked, "So, will you be willing to take the responsibility for that?" She finished pointing to the hollow. Uryu smirked and pushed up his glasses. Oh, a Shinigami scared of a simple Mino's Grand. His smirk widened when he saw her scowl at him. "Let's forget the competition for now and take this one down," she said seriously. Even still, she internally frowned at the thought that even captains have trouble taking down a Mino's Grand. So where was the chance that fodder material like her could take it down? "You freeze that thing up while I prepare a powerful arrow," Uryu said, to which she nodded. "Sugi no mai, Hakuren." She then looked at Uryu to see him pointing a brightly glowing arrow at the half-frozen hollow on his left knee. As he positioned the arrow in its proper path, he released it by softly muttering, "Heilig fail." The arrow roared through the air and destroyed half of its body. As its top half body fell in front of them, Rukia flashed close to the Minos and stabbed the ground in front of her once and muttered, "Juhaku." She then followed it by a Hakuren and completely froze the hollow. Uryu jumped over her and then shot an arrow, completely obliterating what was left of a Mino's Grand. Ichigo dropped beside them and clapped. "Well done, you two." The two of them turned to look at him, but Uryu aimed his bow at Ichigo and shot an arrow at him. Rukia saw it in slow motion, her heart beating fast at the thought of Ichigo dying. She was about to rush to his side but stood frozen when said person tilted his head and the arrow killed the hollow behind him. Rukia resealed her sword and let out a sigh. "My oh my, the great Kuchiki." Rukia panicked at the thought of me dying. "And so honored," Ichigo said as he bowed and flashed a smirk at her, letting her know that he noticed her panic and was amused at the sight. Uryu smirked and pushed up his glasses. "Guess a Quincy wins then." His comment brought Rukia out of their reverie. "What? I'm an unseated officer, not a lieutenant nor a captain. My brother wouldn't have sweated at the sight of this many hollows." "True," Ichigo thought and then turned towards her. "Exactly the reason he challenged you." Rukia mulled over his words and then muttered an "Oh. Wait, are you telling me that I'm weak?" Uryu snickered while Ichigo dryly looked at her. "No, you're not weak. You're strong in your own rights. So is Uryu, but stronger than you are." Rukia sighed and nodded her head, knowing that it was the truth. She then flashed to her gigi and came to them in it. "Let's go. I'm hungry." Ichigo nodded and left with her, waving at Uryu over his shoulder, who then frowned and looked up at the sky. Testing her, huh? Ichigo stared at the note written to him that stated Rukia's departure, and thought back to the time they had spent together. He reminisced about their first meeting and from there their discussion about her plans, and then her teaching him Kaido, him lying to her about Grand Fisher not coming. Then the competition. He sighed as he sensed two more spiritual signatures with Rukia. From the looks of it, she was in a fight. On one hand, he wanted to go and back her up by using his authority, and on the other hand, he didn't want to reveal himself so soon. "What should I do, guys?" he asked to his spirits. "Play the hero's role," Shiro asked. "Revealing yourself so soon wouldn't do good, but you shouldn't leave her in that condition as well." "Think, Ichigo. What did you train in the past years for?" Juhabok said. "I can tell that the Shinigami she is fighting has released his Zanpakuto and seal. You should go and use your authority." Akane stated with a frown. "Why, you should help your friend Ichigo," Ao said shyly. Ichigo still hadn't gotten used to her flippant personality. He was so used to being her punching bag that he sometimes stared at her in confusion before realizing that he'd been staring at her thanks to her fidgeting and squirming under his intense gaze. As he was about to open his wardrobe and wear his Shinigami garb, his door opened to reveal Isshin, to which he simply raised an eyebrow. "Kuchiki Byakuya has come with his lieutenant." He left as he said that, knowing that his son would go to her rescue no matter the circumstance. IchiHime was downstairs helping Yuzu washing the dishes. Getting into his Shinigami garb with the Hikori, he leaped out of the window and flashed to Rukia's position. Minutes earlier with Rukia, realizing that her time in the human world was over, she simply placed a note on Ichigo's desk letting him know that she'd left. She at first went to Urahara's shop and dropped her gigi there. Then she flashed to the place where she first came out of the Senkamen to open it once again to return back to Soul Society. It was only thanks to her instincts and practice spars with Ichigo with the sword that she was able to jump back in time to avoid being severed. Rukia, a male voice yelled as the figure stood up from the ground, sword on his shoulder. He appeared to have long crimson hair tied into a ponytail with tribal tattoos covering his forehead under a visor. Renji, Rukia exclaimed after getting a better look at him. What are you doing here? She asked, confused as to why he came to the living world. To take you back so you can pay for the crimes you committed, of course, he yelled as he jumped at her. From another rooftop, a figure with similar clothing to Renji with the addition of a Hikori with the number 6 and a rhombus on the back indicating his position as a captain stood watching the fight. It was under his orders that he had attacked his sister. He wanted to see if she had grown in any ways or not, so he watched patiently as his sister met blows with blows against the redhead, much to his amusement and the redhead's frustration. Why did you interact with a human and taught him things he wasn't supposed to know? Renji asked as he continued fighting her. He was sure she was holding back and acknowledged the fact that she was strong. I couldn't help it. The boy had high Ryatsu levels and often attracted hollows, so I had to teach him a few kaidos to make sure he didn't die. With a grunt, she leapt at the redhead and got into a stalemate. She then placed her right hand and charged up lightning. Aokasen, the wave of yellow lightning hit the redhead point blank, leaving burn marks. Renji looked at his captain and got a nod from him. He removed his limiter and yelled, "Roar, Zabumaru." His normal sword transformed into an even longer 6-part segmented blade. Each segment was wider than the one preceding it from the hilt, with 2 pick-like protrusions on the front and back of each segment, with the ones on the front much longer than the ones on the back. He then sent his segmented sword at Rukia and was successful in grazing her shoulder, making her hiss in pain. Renji then said, "You seem to have taken a liking to the human, it seems. So what if I did? What's it to you? Who I take a liking to is none of your business." She then got into her favorite stance and released her Zanpakuto dance, Sode no Shirayuki. She then proceeded to stab the ground and leapt back, saying, "Johaku." Ice traveled at great speeds and caught up to the redhead, but said redhead was able to get out of the way. Sugi no Mai, Hakuren. She then sent a wave of ice towards the redhead, and much to her disappointment he was able to break the ice and get out of the way again. Renji smirked and sent his segmented blades again at her and scowled when she leaped out of the way, barely dodging the prongs. Her earlier confession had irritated him, so he was letting it out on her, believing her to be weak. While the two kept on going at it, Byakuya kept record of how much she had improved, feeling proud of her, which was then crushed when he remembered what she did. He then thought about the human that had caught his sister's attention and wondered about what to do with him. His musing was brought to a halt when a massive force fell down on them, immediately reminding him of the head captain. Rukia paled as she recognized the Ryatsu signature, but was shocked to see how much bigger it was than hers. Renji, on the other hand, was scared and confused as to who the spiritual pressure belonged to, thinking that it was his captain's doing. He looked at him and, much to his confusion, found his captain looking in the direction Rukia was looking at with narrowed eyes. The pressure that dropped in them was only for a second and was able to succeed in what it was intended for. The fight stopped and the three waited with bated breath to see who it was. The area was eerily quiet and soon a figure was seen walking towards them. Renji squinted his eyes but failed to get a proper look at the figure. Soon 3 pairs of eyes widened as they saw an orange-haired tall teen appear in front of them, clad in a variation of Shinigami garb with a Hikori. Ichigo, Rukia choked out, startling out the other two out of their thoughts. "You never told me about this," she said, hurt that her friend didn't tell her about it. "I was planning on doing so tonight, but look what happened." The bunny ran out of the house only to get in trouble with a red pineapple head and a statue. Ichigo finished with his trademark smirk. Rukia blushed the implications of the word bunny and shook her head, trying her best to get rid of the suggestive images and forced down her embarrassment, while the eyebrows of the other two Shinigami twitched in annoyance. Renji then noticed how loose Rukia was around Ichigo and concluded that the human was standing before him, but his question remained. Why was he clad in Shinigami clothing with a Hikori? Renji's annoyance then increased and was thinking hard on who to lash at, Rukia or the strawberry. While the fiasco was going on below before Byakuya, he was too shocked to do anything when he saw the back of the Hikori. Royal Guard. What is a Royal Guard doing here? He was panicking inside while keeping a calm visage outside, which nearly shattered when the Royal Guard looked at him with an all-knowing smirk. He then noticed his lieutenant yelling something at the orange-haired Royal Guard and struggled not to facepalm. "You, so you're the human that she mentored, huh?" Renji yelled at Ichigo from his position. He didn't care that Ichigo was wearing a Hikori. 2 things he was sure of were the fact that the man before him was a human and the same person to have gotten liked by Rukia. Ichigo narrowed his eyes and said in a voice that screamed of power, "And what of it?" This seemed to irritate Renji more, who launched himself at Ichigo, fully intent on cutting the annoying pest down. Rukia, seeing that Ichigo was unarmed, stood in front of him to protect him from Renji's rage-fueled attack. Before Renji's Zanpakuto could even clash with Rukia's, blood erupted from a diagonal slash that ran down his left shoulder to his right hip. The Kuchiki siblings looked on in shock as the redhead fall to ground with a thug bleeding to unconsciousness. The two of them looked at Ichigo, who sheathed his sword on his left hip beside the other one. Kisk, annoying extras. He then closed Renji in a yellow box and used long-range Kaido to close the wound on Renji. Long-range Kaido was something only he could do, it was also his invention. The siblings looked on in shock, both having different thoughts. So this is what a royal guard is capable of. What more is he hiding from me? Ichigo then coughed and gained the siblings' attention. What were your orders, Captain Kuchiki? He spoke in a tone that screamed of authority. Byakuya gulped slightly and then said, my orders were to bring my sister Kuchiki Rukia back to Soul Society, and have Central 46 decide her punishment for teaching a human knowledge about something that he shouldn't be aware of. Ichigo hummed while Rukia looked at her brother with a dumb expression on her face. So why is it that your lieutenant was fighting her? I wanted to see how much she had progressed, so I had him fight my sister. Byakuya answered without missing a beat. Ichigo hummed again and thought about what his next move would be. Well, you may go, but tell the Captain Commander that a royal guard will be arriving soon and her judgment is to held out till then. I understood. Byakuya nodded and picked up Renji as Rukia opened the Senkamen. Oh, be sure to punish your lieutenant for not thinking before acting, Ichigo said with a grin as he waved at their passing figures. Byakuya and Rukia bowed and left, but not before looking back at him one last time, getting the untold message. See you at Soul Society. As the Senkamen closed, Ichigo sighed and headed towards his home to break the news of him leaving for Soul Society tomorrow. Ichigo stepped out of the Senkamen into a very somber Serete. The atmosphere seemed broody and was filled with sadness. What the hell happened? Sensing Byakuya, Ichigo flashed to his location and found himself beside said person in his garden, bandages wrapped around his body under the kimono he wore, startling the man. Kurosaki-sama. Byakuya trailed off, recognizing Ichigo, who nodded at him. What happened? Ichigo asked with a raised eyebrow. Byakuya sighed and spoke up. Yesterday when we returned here, the three of us were intercepted by former captains Ikamaru Jin and Tozen Kaname. Tozen kidnapped Rukia while I had to fend off Ikamaru. After a bit of fighting, Ikamaru looked at the Sakayoku Hill and without a word flashed over there. I rushed to Squad 4 and handed over my lieutenant to a medic and sent the message about traitors among the ranks using Hell Butterfly. By the time I reached the top, I found Rukia on the ground, a hole above her chest with Aizen Sasuke shadowing her with a scowl fixed on his face. As he was about to kill her, I jumped in and blocked his slash. As we fell into a stalemate, Jin used his Shikai to impale me, and then all the captains came. The three of them were branded traitors due to killing Central 46 and in the end escaped to Huko Mundo, having joined with the Hollows and declared war on us. He finished sipping his tea while Ichigo processed everything with his teacup in his hands. How's Rukia? He asked as he sipped his tea. She's recovering quite well thanks to Captain Anohana. Ichigo nodded, satisfied with the answer. Well, I'll drop by later to check up on her. Gotta go talk to the old dragon. See ya. With that, Ichigo was gone, shocking Byakuya not only by what he called the Captain Commander but the near solid afterimage as well. Shizukuni Genryusai Yamamoto hasn't been this tired for the entirety of his life as a Captain Commander after the Blood War. Recently 3 captains turned out to be traitors and also told him about the truth behind the exile of 7 captains and 4 lieutenants. He bristled in anger as he realized that he was fooled for a long while and wanted nothing more than unleashing Ryujin Jaka on the traitorous former captain Aizen Sasuke. But he didn't, knowing that his subordinates would be in danger if he did so and had to watch the scene unfold before him. He sighed once again as he mulled over what Captain Kuchiki had told him yesterday. He couldn't believe it. A royal guard roaming around in the living world. The two had suspicions about the orange-haired royal guard being rogue, but immediately threw that thought out when a different Hell Butterfly, one belonging to the royal guards, came and told him of his meeting with the new royal guard. Shiba Kurosaki Ichigo was his name, son of Mia Captain Shiba Isshin and the Quincy Kurosaki Masaki, a noble among the Quincy's. Not only was the 6th member a Shinigami Quincy hybrid, he was also a noble among both races. His musings were brought to a halt when his longtime friend and lieutenant came and told him about the royal guard. Send him in. His lieutenant nodded and called out to his guest. He took his seat on his chair and motioned his guest to take the one opposite to him. He then took a good look at the young hybrid and noted his appearance. His hair was long and tied into a ponytail at the neck. He wore a variation of the Shinigami garb with its sleeves being marked with small diamonds and spheres of golden yellow color. Single trim lines on each sleeve started from 2 spheres, one on top and other from bottom, and joined together on the shoulder up to the collar. The hem of his hakama was marked with thin and long vertical kites that reached slightly above his calves. The obi was also golden yellow. The Hikori was also a variation, but a Hikori nonetheless. It had 2 shoulder pads colored black with golden scales and extended outwards to form an X above the chest before joining with the Hikori again at the hip. At the center point of the X, he noticed, was his Quincy cross. The diamonds and spheres on the hem of the Hikori were royal purple, and the sides of the Hikori were marked with 3 slim trim lines of royal purple. I take it you were notified of my coming? The teen across him asked, steel in his voice that reminded him of his younger days as a commander. The old dragon nodded as he took a sip of the tea his lieutenant had brought. Might I ask what you plan on doing with the youngest Kuchiki? Ichigo nodded as he sipped his tea. She did nothing wrong. When she first arrived, I let a considerable amount of Ryatsu leak from me, thus attracting hollows. At that point I decided to take her test without notifying her. Then for the next few days I supported her barehanded whenever a hollow came, and since she knew that I wouldn't be able to protect myself without her from stronger hollows, she decided to teach me Kaido, even though it a crime to do so, but she prioritized my life over hers and taught me 4 Hados and Bakuto. He paused and took a sip of his tea and continued, it was funny watching how she pulled her hair in frustration when she was teaching me those Kaidos. After that, I had my Quincy friend challenge her to a competition of who could kill the highest number of hollows. Don't worry, I had placed a barrier to prevent humans from getting close to us. Obviously she lost, but she is well capable of teamwork, proven when she killed the Mino's grand, something I'm sure has to do with Aizen with him. And that's my report on her along with my judgment. She did what was necessary and I deem her innocent. Now the question is, what will you decide? Ichigo continued drinking his tea as he watched various emotions play across the old dragon's face. He was amused to say the least. The old dragon then sighed and said, I'll announce her innocent tomorrow at the captain's meeting. Though, the hornet of a captain might protest and wish for your permission to bring me and lock me up in a cell, right? Ichigo said, to which the old dragon nodded and sighed. Well, you might as well introduce this human. He pointed at himself and continued, ... to the captains. Should be entertaining to say the least. The old dragon snorted and nodded. Will do. After all, you'll be moving in here to lead Squad 0, Serete branch, alongside becoming the head of the royal family Shiba Kurosaki. Yup, my family is quite understanding and I plan on bringing them here after the war. Then Ichigo remembered about the matter of exiles and asked, by the way, what are you going to do now that you know Kisuke and the others were innocent? The old dragon stayed quiet for a while before answering. I'll send them apology letters and remove their brand as exiles. Take the letters before you leave for the human world. Ichigo then stood up and left with a quick see ya. The old dragon then sighed and looked at the Serete from his position, wondering about the changes about to come. Rats everywhere. As promised, Ichigo had directly went to the Kuchiki Manor and found both siblings in the garden watching the koi pond. Yo, how are you doing, Rukia? Ichigo greeted, startling both of them. Ichigo, what are you doing here? Rukia asked as she regained her composure. What? I can't drop by to see my only friend here, Ichigo asked, tilting his head to the left. And besides, I need to tell you more about me. Oh, well then what are you waiting for? As Byakuya was about to leave, Ichigo placed his hand on his shoulder and told him to stay. You need to know as well. Byakuya nodded hesitantly and sat down. Ichigo coughed into his hand and began. My name is Shiba Kurosaki Ichigo, son of former Shiba clan head and former Squad 10 captain, Shiba Isshin, now known as Kurosaki Isshin. My mother is a Quincy noble named Kurosaki Masaki, and I'm a Shinigami Quincy Hollow hybrid and the 6th Squad 0 officer. Silence fell upon the 2 siblings, frozen in place with their mouths and eyes open wide. Byakuya came out of his shock first and then said, that means you're a noble to both the Quincy's and Shinigami. Rukia nodded her head at Ichigo and then asked, why didn't you tell me these earlier back then? She had a hurt expression on her face which made Ichigo sigh. If I did tell you, would you have believed me? Or even if you did, do you really think you would have seen us as friends? Rukia was about to say yes but stopped when she properly thought about it. He was her superior, and considering him her friend would be seen as disrespect in the other's eyes, and as a Kuchiki herself she couldn't bring shame to the clan. Look Rukia, you're the only friend I have here, so don't let my status ruin the bond we have, okay? Rukia nodded with a smile and then asked when one thing about him came to her mind. Wait, if your mother is a Quincy and your father a Shinigami, then where did your hollow come from? Ichigo smiled. for that I need to tell you how Dad and Mom met. You see, nearly 2 decades ago. He continued telling the story of how his father met his mother, and by the time he was done, Byakuya asked him to join them in dinner and stay for the night. Ichigo was about to refuse, but a stern glare from Rukia made him agree. Omik, Alternate Universe. Chapter 2 Confessions. NOOO. Ichigo exclaimed loudly for the whole world to hear as he fell on his chair and hit the table, knocking himself out cold. The whole class looked at him as if he had lost it. The silence was broken with Rukia's melodious laughter as she stood beside Ichigo's unconscious form, surprising everyone with the speed at which she covered the distance. My, Icon, you're so excited to see me that you passed out. Typical of you. She then, with an impressive display of power in her petite form, carried Ichigo bridal style and walked towards the door. I'm taking him to the infirmary. See you later. And she was gone with another impressive display of speed. Break a leg, you two, Miss Ochai yelled, poking her head out from the class. She then returned to her position in between the board and teacher's desk and said, well, that happened. What are you waiting for? Pull out your books, you brats. XXX. Ichigo stirred on his bed and groggily opened his eyes. Huh? What am I doing at the infirmary? His answer came in the form of 2 arms snaking around his neck, followed by a sweet voice. Icon, I'm back. She silenced him with a breathtaking kiss as he was about to panic, judging by the widening of his eyes. She forced her tongue into his mouth as he froze in his position with mouth and eyes open wide for assault. Much to her satisfaction, he moaned into her mouth with closed eyes as she played with his organ. After a few seconds, the two separated for the lack of oxygen, and Ichigo let his head rest on the pillow while Rukia made herself comfortable on his chest. I'm sorry, Rukia muttered, pressing her face deeper into his chest. Hey, what for? Ichigo asked, confused as to why she apologized. True, she was his nightmare, but what she did in the past was her way of showing her affection. He knew it very well, however it wasn't of any comfort knowing that, as he was always marked by her since they made the promise. Let's marry when we grow up, okay? Promise? Come, sure, it's a promise. Ever since that day 8 years ago, followed by the next 2 years, she'd showered him with affection by leaving love bites every time she left his house. Don't get them wrong. They didn't do anything scandalous. In fact, the love bites were encouraged by their parents themselves. So blame their parents for your misunderstandings. Perverts. Moving on. Ichigo looked at her hidden face and thought about their past. Their promise. It was something we made when we were kids. So does it count? He thought, his eyes never leaving her head. Oh hell, whatever. Kids promise or not, it's happening. He then proceeded to flip their positions, with him on top and her under him, with her limbs wrapped around his body. Icon, what are yo mmh? She was silenced by a kiss courtesy of Ichigo. Ichigo broke the kiss and said, keep your apologies to yourself. We're marrying the instant we graduate from high school, and nothing will stop me from marrying you. Got it, bunny? Rukia listened to him with wide eyes as he confessed to her. Tears gathered in her eyes and she flipped their positions back to what it was and roughly kissed him. Got it. Ichigo smiled and kissed her forehead. Love you. Love you too. Chapter 7. Failed Kidnapping and New Alliance. A month. It's been a month since he's left Soul Society and escaped to Huko Mundo to rule over it. A month since he'd been fooled. What he figured was the Hagioku simply turned out to be a glass sphere containing liquid that glowed in purple hue and had similar energy signature. This meant one thing. The Hagioku has been destroyed. When he had come to later realize that he was fooled by Kisukirahara, he'd lost it, and to make it worse, Jin had started laughing his ass off, but in the end was put on the end of his wrath. So he focused on improving his own Hagioku and force it into completion. But before that, he'd need more additions to his army. He was shaken out of his reverie when the doors to the throne room opened and revealed his Tres Espada, Tyr Harrible. You summoned me, Lord Aizen? Tyr asked as she looked up at Aizen. Yes, I did. I have a mission for you. You'll be visiting the living world and bring me my pet projects. He then asked Tozen to hand over all the information about her destination and target. She took the file and waited for further orders. You'll be leaving in 3 hours. By that time it'll be past midnight and everyone will be asleep. He narrowed his eyes and said, failure won't be tolerated. He then dismissed her and drank tea from the cup given to him by Tozen. Won't there be Shinigami patrols in that town, Lord Aizen? Tozen asked once he was sure that Tyr was gone. Not to mention that Kisukirahara is also there. Aizen hummed and said, the Shinigami patrols won't be much of a trouble. Since this is a stealth mission, Harrible is well aware of the fact that she'd have to do this after suppressing her Ryatsu. And she's not Grimmjow or Noidora for that matter. However, I am serious about the intolerance of failure. This mission is also a test. A test? Yes, she might be a hollow, but she has morals that humans do. I want to see if she'd hesitate to follow orders as straight as given or not. He sipped his tea and smiled when his Quattro Espada appeared. What can I do for you, Lord Aizen? Ulquira asked. Harrible will be leaving in 3 hours to a trip to the living world. I want you to simply observe and do nothing. Even if she's in a fight, should she fail the mission, you'll return at once without her. Am I understood? Understood. Is that all? He left when he got a nod. My, you seem eager to dispose of your army, Lord Aizen. Jin asked as he revealed himself from behind one of the pillars with his trademark grin on his face. It doesn't matter. I have found someone who is on par with our dear Primera. He's graciously agreed to join in on my cause and will arrive tomorrow. So you do plan on disposing her? Jin exclaimed, his trademark grin widening. You're so cruel. You know me so well, Jin. Tyr leaned against the balcony thinking about what she's about to do. She'd read the file and drilled in the information in her mind. It hurt her to do this, but she must follow her orders, and war was coming. Her Fraxian had been quite noisy and she'd asked to be left alone to her own thoughts. She'd be breaking an already broken family, and though this did not sit well with her, she had to do it or else someone else would have to do it, and she doubted they'd be gentle. After going through various scenarios and plans, she got ready to leave for her mission. It's been a month since Ichigo had returned from his trip to Soul Society. His squad barracks would be done by the next month and then he'll return there for good. After the war, he'd be taking his position as the head of the clan. He was grateful that he was born in the Shiba clan, as they were a bunch of lazy asses who preferred to follow their heart and do what is right just like him. When he'd shown up at his cousin Kukaku's home, she'd been ecstatic to know that she had more family members alive and had thrown a party. He was the one who asked to be the clan head, and at first she'd refused but had to agree when he brought the point of the clan head being a Shinigami, something she wasn't. She had then introduced him to the Rukengai denizens, who surprisingly had welcomed him with open arms. He thought that since he was a Shinigami he'd be looked at with disdain, but turned out that it was the opposite. They didn't care that he was a Shinigami, all they cared about was that he was a Shiba, and they could tell who was pretending and who wasn't to be one. He had spent the last day spending time with his cousins, both of them giving him a tour of West Rukengai. There were a lot of souls from the Rukengai that bid him farewell with gifts of their own. That day he promised to them that after he'd become the clan head, he'd work on improving the Rukengai. He didn't tell them about the war as he didn't want them to panic, and had left with the promise of returning ASAP. He silently laughed as he recalled what happened in the captain's meeting. Flashback: 1 month ago, captain's meeting. And thus Kuchiki Rukia is deemed innocent under the watchful eyes of the royal guard. Lieutenant Sasaki finished reading in front of all captains. Yamamoto opened an eye and looked at the captains. The 6th squad captain, despite being impassive, seemed less stiff and relaxed compared to the beginning of the meeting. His former students both seemed relieved that the girl's life was spared. The 4th squad captain was smiling. The 7th squad captain remained impassive in his bandaged form, finally ridding himself of the mask. The 10th squad captain was a bit pale from the injuries he had sustained and seemed worried for his childhood friend on the verge of mental breakdown. The 11th squad brute of a captain seemed bored and seemed to be wishing for a good fight. The same bar fighting part could be told for the 12th division clown of a scientist. He mentally sighed as he saw the scowling face of the 2nd squad captain, or Hornet as dubbed by the orange-haired brat. What about the human? Shouldn't actions be taken against him for knowing about the afterlife? The 2nd squad captain asked from her position, seemingly eager to take care of the human. Yamamoto snorted mentally. That brat is anything but human. He then looked at the short captain and boomed in the direction of his office. Enter. Sounds of jaw hitting the floor resounded as said human entered the room, garbed in a variation of both Shinigami garb and Hikori, with the royal guard emblem on the back, under which another emblem of a half-skull, half-hollow mask in a flame could be seen. As Ichigo expected, the Hornet really did cause a scene. You, Kurosaki Ichigo, what are you doing here dressed like that? You aren't happy to see me, Captain Soifon. Sniff, Ichigo said with fake tears causing her eyebrow to twitch. Don't add sniff at the end, you human. Ichigo simply stuck out his tongue and made bleh sound, causing the captains to sweat drop at the scene, further irritating the short captain, who was on the verge of killing him, much to his amusement. Ichigo them straightened up and said, I am the royal guard that made the report on Kuchiki Rukia. My name is Shiba Kurosaki Ichigo, the human that became a royal guard with 5 years of thorough training under said squad. He internally smirked, seeing the gobsmacked expression on the face of every captain. Are you by any chance Isshin's son? The 13th squad captain Yukitake Jishiro asked. Sadly, yes. I am that sorry excuse of a Shinigami former captain's son. Ichigo sighed out, waves of despair rolling out of him, causing some captains to chuckle. Captain Shiba is alive. Ichigo nodded at the shorter 10th squad captain. You know, you're sort of my older brother considering the fact that the man-child always saw you as his son, Ichigo said, surprising his pseudo-older brother. Ah, I see. Ichigo chuckled, seeing the captain confused. Moving on. Have you told them about the decision regarding the exiles? Everyone perked up at the mention of the word exiles. That bastard is still alive. Soifon roared and then faced the captain commander. With your orders, Aika. Silence, Captain Soifon. Allow Shiba Dono to explain the truth regarding the exiles a century ago. Yamamoto boomed as he glared at Soifon. Right, a century ago. Flashback end. He was brought from his reminiscing when his radar detected a powerful hollow presence heading towards his house. He suppressed his Ryatsu and applied Bakuto #26 Kyoko as he exited his room through the window. He found the hollow heading towards his twin sister's room and followed it. There wasn't enough moonlight to allow him a proper visual of the lone hollow, but he concluded that it was either a Vasto Lord or an Arrancar, judging by its size. He gritted his teeth as he realized who was behind this. Aizen. Curious, he trailed its movement and found out it was an Arrancar, and a female one at that. He'd also noticed another hollow watching this from afar and concluded that the both of them were on equal footing but far cry from him in terms of power. Just as she was about to touch Yuzu, he chopped her on the neck and caught her as she fell unconscious. He picked her up on his shoulders like a sack of potatoes and was about to flash towards Kisuke's shop if not for the 3 new arrivals. You, the black-haired one asked as she noticed Ichigo carrying Tear over his shoulder unconscious. He dropped the spell as soon as he was done knocking her out, so as a result he was found out and cursed at his carelessness. What do you think you're doing with Lady Harrible? Ichigo scowled as he realized that he was caught off guard by fodder materials. The 3 surrounded him as he stepped out of the window. Hand her over now, or face our wrath. The olive-haired one sighed and said, if you don't want to get hurt then please do hand our master over to us. Ichigo simply raised an eyebrow and said, you do realize that your master was about to kidnap my sisters. So why shouldn't I take action to protect them? That's because she was ordered to do so. The olive-haired one replied. Ichigo nodded and said, I see. Hakifuku. As he finished, purple cherry blossoms started falling around them and slowly the 3 of them started to feel the effect of the spell. Arg, what the hell? My head hurts. The brown-haired one asked. What did you do? You TRD. The black-haired one asked as she fell to the ground, joining the brown-haired one. She Gia mi. The olive-haired one trailed off as she joined the other 2 as well. Ichigo sighed as his father came in his soul form and asked what happened when he saw 4 Arrancars. As per norm, he asked excitedly whether the one on his shoulder would be his daughter-in-law or not. The answer he got was a punch and an order to pick the other 2 up, and he picked the olive-haired one on his free shoulder. Together they left for the shop. From afar, Ulquira watched as Tear entered the room but was later confused as to what was taking her so time to do her job. Just as he was about to get close, he saw her Fraxian arrive at the same spot and search for their master. He then saw the 3 of them arguing with someone and caught a glimpse of blonde on the unknown figure's shoulder. So she failed, he thought. He didn't dare go to her rescue. His orders were to just observe, and with his job done, he opened a garganta and left. Tear groaned as she woke up from her unexpected slumber. She remembered being ordered to kidnap 2 humans who were her lord's pet projects. She also remembered being near her targets, and just as she was about to grab the lighter-haired one, I was knocked out. But who? As she looked around her, she found her 3 subordinates lying on the ground unconscious. Apache, Mila Rose, Sung Sun. She immediately rushed to them and checked their vitals. She sighed when she was able to conclude that they were simply knocked out. She also had her Zanpakuto with her. But the question was, who caught her and what are their intentions? Finally awake, I see. A male voice came from far behind her. She turned, hand immediately going to her Zanpakuto as she did so, and looked at the arrival. He was tall, taller than her, shy of 6 feet, and had a lean muscular body, wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. The eye-catching feature was the orange hair he had. They are sleeping. Don't worry. She nodded, hand still on her Zanpakuto. She trailed his movements as he sat atop a boulder and looked at her. I have a few questions for you. Will you be kind enough to answer them? By the way, I'm Ichigo. Taking this her cue to introduce herself, she situated herself on the boulder opposite to him and said, Tear Harrible. Where are we? When did they get here? What are you? She said the last part with narrowed eyes and edge in her voice. He seems relaxed, as if I'm not a threat to him. She concluded that he wasn't human, judging by the small amount of unique Ryatsu leaking from him. We're in an underground basement used for training. They got here just as I was about to bring you here after knocking you out. As for what, why don't you guess? Ichigo said and narrowed his eyes. Since I was kind enough to answer your questions, would you be kind enough to answer mine? Tear was a woman of honor and self-respect, and she had rudely interrupted him with her questions, and he had even went as far as to answer her questions ignoring her rudeness. So it's only fair that she agrees, right? She knew he wasn't a human. His Ryatsu had taints of both Shinigami and Hollow, so does that make him a hybrid? There's also a third taint in his Ryatsu that she couldn't put a name to. The more she thought about him, the more she was gaining interest in the young man in front of her. She pursed her lips under her mask and nodded, getting a smile from the young man in front of her. Thank you. First question. What were you doing in my sister's room and why? He asked as he wrote the question under her name. He'd gotten a good look of her after coming to the shop, even if most of her face was hidden under the collar. She had a figure that models would kill to get, an hourglass figure with tan skin and blonde hair and eyelashes. He'd seen her aqua eyes as well, and he'd be lying if he said his face didn't heat up for a moment. I was ordered by my lord to bring the twins to him. He had only told me that they were his pet projects and wanted to utilize their dormant abilities for the upcoming war. To her surprise, Ichigo had noted that down with a smile. She was even more confused to see the piece of paper atop a hard surface on his thighs. Where did they come from? Ichigo nodded and wrote down the answer with a smile. Okay. Second question. What did you personally think of this mission of yours? Judging by your reaction to their lives not being in jeopardy, I can tell that you're a caring person. So can I know what you thought about it? Tear noted one thing. He didn't call her a hollow but a person. Tear looked down and said, I didn't originally want to do this mission after I got the file regarding it, but orders are orders and I had to follow them. It hurt to do this mission. I would be the one responsible for breaking a family that is already broken but is recovering, and it isn't something that I agree with. She finished, surprised that she had told so much to the young man before her whom she knew nothing about, but being close to him made her feel safe, as if he wouldn't let anything happen to her. And he was kind as well. I see. You know, I've fought and met many hollows, specifically Vasto Lords and Arrancars. They weren't like you. You have this protective aura around you similar to what a mother would have. You're not fit to be called a hollow. You've got a heart that others don't. He ended with smile and was pleased to see her shocked expression. Why you've fought Vasto Lords? She asked, too shocked to keep her voice down, waking her Fraxian up. Arg, what the hell happened? My head hurts, Apache asked as she got up in a seated position. That damned orange-haired bastard. He knocked us out, Kneeler Rose said. Ichigo rose his eyebrows as he noticed that they knew what happened. Normally targets don't have any idea of what had happened before blacking out, but they did and concluded it being a hollow thing. Sung-sun simply sat up and looked for her master and found her sitting opposite to the man who she knew knocked them out. She noticed a concerned expression on her mask-covered face. Sung-sun knew her master and friend better than the other two. She could tell what her friend was feeling even if she hid them. She stood up and on wobbly legs walked to her friend. Are you okay, Lady Harrible? She asked and saw her frown under the collar. She then looked at her previous assailant who was simply looking at them with a smile. Yo, sorry about earlier. Had to knock you out so that my sisters didn't wake up, he said as he ran his fingers through the small ponytail on his neck. The name is Ichigo, by the way. Sung-sun narrowed her eyes and looked at her friend, master, and got a nod. And Sung-sun. Those two are Kneeler Rose and Apache. She introduced herself and the fighting duo. I see. What are your plans, Harrible Sam? Knowing Aizen, he wouldn't take kindly the fact that you failed in your mission. And there was also another Arrancar watching you from afar but did nothing and left as soon as you were seen unconscious on my shoulder. The four's eyes widened as he mentioned Aizen. Tear was told that failure wouldn't be tolerated and paled when she thought of her punishment. Being demoted from her ranks and used as a whore for other hollows. Will be returning, of course. Don't want to stay here longer than needed, Apache said with Kneeler Rose nodding in approval. We can't do that. Surprisingly, it was Sung-sun who said that. We'd be seen as weak for being defeated by a lone Shinigami, and Lady Harrible would be removed from her position as the Tres Espada. Tear nodded and looked down, wondering what to do. She was torn between returning and asking this person for help. You can always stay here. Ichigo began surprising them. I mean, by now she's probably been removed from her rank as an Espada, and if she did return, then who knows what might happen. He finished with a shrug and waited for their answer. But why are you willing to help us? I mean, I did try to kidnap your sisters, so why are you volunteering? Tear asked with nods from her Fraxian. Ichigo scratched his head and said, First is the fact that you're strong and we need all the manpower we can get to face off against that marble-obsessed man. Second is that you were simply following orders and reluctantly so. You admitted feeling bad in doing so. Third is that you're very similar to me but different at the same time, and besides, I believe you can complete your transformation. Tear was surprised to hear his reasons, judging by the fact that he stopped her just in time from harming his sisters and treated her with respect despite her previous action. Then the last part of his sentence rang in her head. What do you mean by completing my transformation? She got a smile from him which, unlike Aizen's superior ones, was real and gentle. Exactly as it sounds. You might be an Arrancar but you have a heart. And the only things that are blocking you from unlocking it and gaining it back are the mask and the hole. Only you can remove them and once again feel complete. The emptiness is still there, isn't it? He said, all the while gently smiling at Tear. When she thought about it, he indeed was right. The emptiness was still there and she sometimes felt emotions others didn't. She unconsciously ran a hand over her jacket where her mask fragment was as she thought about the possibilities that would be revealed once she regained her heart. She kept a hand over her left breast where her heart was supposed to be and took a deep breath. She looked at Ichigo and nodded with determination in her eyes. Ichigo sighed and said, you can still back out if you want. It'll be a painful process and it'll be more painful than anything you've ever felt before. You'd wish death over this pain. So I ask you, Tear Harrible again. Are you willing to endure the pain and get this over with? Tear Mock glared at him and said, you speak as if you have done this before. Her eyes widened when she heard his reply. Of course, I had to do it to unlock my Resurreccion, he said with a smile as he got down the boulder and dusted his clothes. Tear was gaping at him. Not only did you fight Vasto Lords, you also have Resurreccion. Her statement caused the other three to widen their eyes before the black-haired one started laughing. You, Resurreccion, don't fuck with me. You're not a hollow to begin with, nor an Arrancar for that matter. Who'd fuck with you? Neela Rose asked, ticking Apache off. What was that cow? Apache roared as she butted her head with Neela Rose's one. You heard me. Who'd fuck someone with a body like yours? She laughed at Apache's expression. Apache growled and pounced on Neela Rose, starting a fight with her, causing the other two women to sigh while Ichigo chuckled. So Harrible-san, what is your decision? Ichigo asked as he stood before her. Tear stood up and looked at him straight in the eyes even though she had to look up to do so. I'm willing to do it and will endure it. Ichigo looked at her for a moment before nodding. He stood up from his boulder and walked over to her, and then lowered himself to her level and closed his eyes. He gently touched her temples and pressed his forehead to hers and felt her stiffen. Sorry, had to do it. She relaxed a bit and nodded. Ichigo then took a few deep breaths, prompting her to do so with him. It starts when I open my eyes, and remember this, accept who you are now and who you were in your past. As long as you reject yourself, you won't come out of this trance and suffer endless pain. Abandon your fear. Look forward, move forward and never stop. You'll age if you pull back. You'll die if you hesitate. Tear's breath was taken from her as she heard him speak those wise words and then felt herself breathing rapidly. She was grateful that he didn't open his eyes yet. He was letting her calm down so that she doesn't fall into any kind of risky situation. She nodded with his fingers still on her temples. Her eyes widened when he opened his eyes. His eyes were gold with black sclere. Look into my eyes. Dive deep into your soul. As he was saying the lines, the black part of his eyes started peeling themselves off, revealing the milky white layer, and left his eyes golden yellow as they moved to her eyes and started covering her sclere as well, turning her ones black. Learn who you are, and who you will be. And no matter the circumstances, accept yourself fully. Only then will you regain what you've lost. As he finished, he saw her aqua on black eyes stare at him unfocused. He then gently laid her down and looked at Sung-sun as she looked more sensible of the bunch. Don't worry, she'll be fine. This will take a few hours to end. The process will be done when the black of her eyes vanishes. Stay by her side even though nothing will happen to her. Sung-sun saw the whole thing occur and wanted to stop it but knew how much it meant to her friend. So she watched everything happen while the other two continued fighting, completely oblivious to what was happening. She nodded when Ichigo tasked her to look after Tear and placed her head on her lap. Good. My eyes won't be returning back to normal either as long as she's like that. I'll return when it's done. See you. He left the basement as she nodded and went up to talk to Kisuke and hopefully get some rest before she's done. As soon as Ulquira had returned to report on what had transpired in the human world, all Espada were summoned in the meeting to know what had happened to the Tres Espada. When the room was filled with the Espada, everyone save for Baragon and Ulquira had been looking at the seat of Tres Espada, wondering what had happened to her. I see you're confused as to what has happened to Tear Harrible. To this everyone save for Baragon and Ulquira nodded. Even Stark, the laziest of all Espada, was paying full attention. Aizen continued, she was sent earlier to the human world on a mission and she hasn't returned since then. Ulquira, if you would. Of course, Lord Aizen. Ulquara said as he gauged out his eye and crushed it, and the particles formed into a screen that showed what had happened in the human world. None of them gave enough damn to care what had happened to her and so brushed her failure off like it was nothing. HMPH, as expected of a weakling like her, Baragon said as he crossed his arms and sat in his position with his eyes closed. The visual showed that she was captured by the Shinigami, and if she was caught off guard then that means that Shinigami is a threat to your plans, is he not? Stark asked, surprising everyone that he bothered watching the whole thing. He isn't. Even if he is now, he won't be one as soon as the Hagioku becomes active, and the war is still far away. Stark nodded and slumped in his chair, another sane comrade gone. Noitora grinned and said, finally, that bitch is gone. Ha 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 ha, serves her right. Surely this means promotions for us, right, Lord Aizen? Aizen smirked and said, sadly not. I've already found her replacement and he's waiting for my permission to show up. You may come in. The door opened and walked in a male Arrancar. Everyone looked at him and saw that he was fairly tall as Noitora or more. He had a lean muscular body and midnight black hair that goes past his shoulders and had blood-red eyes. His mask was plain and covered half of the right side of his face from the forehead to just above his upper lip. Please welcome the new Tres Espada, Tsubasa Akio. Tear didn't know how long she'd been fighting this younger albino doppelganger of hers. One thing she knew was that this doppelganger was the source of her past memories, and it was proven when every time she got cut she was assaulted with glimpses of her memories and her head burst into pain. Surprisingly, her doppelganger stopped and looked at her with worry evident in her eyes. Her younger albino doppelganger wore a black turtleneck shirt with white trim lines running down vertically down her left side. She wore short white jeans that reached down to her thighs and folded up, revealing black underneath, and a pair of knee-length boots. On her hand was the black version of her own Zanpakuto, yet it was longer and narrower than hers. Come on, Tia, don't forget what Ichigo said. The more you draw this out, the more you'll be hurt. It's already been 3 hours that you've been here. Why are you rejecting me? Her doppelganger exclaimed as she lunged at her in a stabbing motion. She missed. What do you mean rejecting you? You're trying to kill me. Tia, now named Tia, remembered what she was actually called during her life as a human. No, I'm not, her albino copy said as they got into another battle of skills. That's it. Hunt. Tiburon. Tia's eyes widened as she was blown back from the powerful explosion caused by the release. Her albino copy appeared in exactly the same outfit, and a variation of same weapon but with inverted colors. Lagoda. She dodged out of the way as the compressed and elongated water shark tooth passed by her. She noted that her albino copy was much more stronger than her. Having left with no choice, she released her Zanpakuto as well. Hunt. Tiburon. As she came out of the heart-shaped water cocoon in her release state, she once again had to block the strike that came from her copy. Her eyes widened when her albino copy placed her hand on her Zanpakuto and fired a point-blank Lagoda. Her body and head burst in pain as her more memories came rushing back to her and she fell to the bottom of the ocean they were fighting in. It had been more than 3 hours since they'd begun the process. Ichigo had napped for a bit and got down to check up on her. As soon as he flashed by her side, he was assaulted by Apache and Mila rose while Sung Sun glared as she held the bleeding and panting Tear. What the hell is happening to her, you damned carrot top? Apache roared as she slashed at him. You said nothing will happen to her, yet she is bleeding and is in pain. Mila Rose said as she shot a ball at him. It's a part of the process, damn it. He ducked and launched 2 Shitatsu Sansen at the two, pinning them to the walls. She's fighting herself instead of accepting. That's why she's bleeding. What do you mean? Sung Sun asked with a frown. She's going through her memories of her past life, or more specifically the memories that caused her to give into despair and become a hollow after death. As long as she fights herself, she won't be coming out of the depths of her soul. She's rejecting herself and is paying the price then. Sung Sun asked and got a nod from him. What have you gotten yourself into, Tear? Both combatants panted across from each other, Tia more so than her copy. She thought back to everything that happened since she fell into this logic-defying ocean. Her albino copy was younger and stronger than her. She could have killed her in any moment's notice, yet she didn't, and had returned pieces of her memories, or precisely the ones that caused her transformation into a hollow after death. Her copy's Zanpakuto differed slightly from her one. The shark tooth-like Pada was narrower and sharper. The gill markings were 5 instead of 3 and had white thunder markings similar to those of her cheeks. Do you know why we have same yet different Zanpakutos? Her copy asked, to which she remained silent. Because you're incomplete. You're rejecting me. As long as you reject me, you won't be complete. Think, Tia, think. Who am I? What am I? She lounged at her original once again in a stabbing motion. Everything around her slowed as Tia saw her copy zoom at her with every intention to stab her. But why? She then thought about what her copy asked and everything clicked. Her copy was her and she was her copy. She was her and vice versa. She understood how she'd been rejecting her and thus let go of the oversized toothpick in her hand and spread her arms out. To her surprise, as soon as her copy's Zanpakuto passed through the center of her chest, she felt no pain. Nothing. Her albino copy smiled and dug the Zanpakuto deeper and hugged her. "I'm sorry," Tia muttered as she returned the hug. "I feel no pain." "Why?" Her copy chuckled and said, "That's because you've accepted me in Tiburon's blade." And not her but simply the box holding all the memories of your despair locked away as soon as you became a hollow. As she said that, she slowly started glowing and became transparent. "Where are you going?" Tia asked, tired from the fatigue of her earlier battle. Her copy chuckled again and smiled. "Simple. I'm going to become one with you, closing the hole and return your heart to you." As she said that, she completely turned to Rizzy and was absorbed by Tia, and Tia's head burst in pain as more memories came back to her. Tia opened her bleary eyes and found the concerned face of Sung-sun above her. She closed her eyes and groaned in pain as she clutched her head. "Lady Horrible," the three of them exclaimed as she groaned. "Are you all right?" Apache asked, getting a stiff nod from her. "Give her some space, you three. In her condition now, she needs space," Ichigo said as he approached the group with a tray of food and drinking water in his hands. He smiled when the three reluctantly nodded and rested their slowly healing master against the wall. "How are you feeling?" he asked, putting the tray and glass on the smaller boulder beside her. Tia opened her eyes as Ichigo started applying Kaido on her and said, "I feel like shit." Euphraxian gaped at her while Ichigo smirked. "I know the feeling." Ichigo nodded as he saw all the wounds on her skin heal themselves under his care. He glanced to her Zanpakuto and stared. It changed. She nodded and glanced at Tiburon lying beside her. Tiburon in her sealed state was now as long as a katana but a bit wider, with the distinction of being completely hollow in the middle, essentially consisting of nothing more than the edges. "It's now complete," she stated as she ate the Rizzy food to replenish what has been lost in those hours. "There, done. Have you checked whether you have the mask in the hole?" he said as he stopped healing her. She stopped eating and immediately zipped open her jacket, letting loose 2 mounds of tanned flesh and the hidden part of her face. Silence fell upon the five as it was revealed that she was naked above her waist with a man opposite to her. Both of them blushed as she zipped up her jacket again, hiding her melons, while Ichigo looked away with a cough, who was then kicked on the head by Apache. "How dare you violate her?" While Apache and Miller Rose were busy stomping Ichigo, Sung-sun stood by Tia's side and noticed the same thing she did. Tia's hole was gone. "So a success then?" she asked, getting a nod from Tia. Her statement had ceased the other two's stomping and gathered around her. As soon as Ichigo sat on the boulder across her, she said, "Ichigo, can I fight you?" Ichigo rose an eyebrow and said, "Only after you take proper rest and regain your strength." She nodded and got back to eating. The next day, Ichigo came to the shop upon a strange sight. In the backyard, Kisuke was tied to a crucifix in a big black pot of boiling violet liquid with his mouth taped, and Uryu was laughing like crazy, facing the sky with her hands raised, with Apache and Mila Rose, while Tia and Sung-sun watched. He coughed and garnered their attention. As soon as their eyes landed on him, Kisuke started struggling against the binding and tried talking to him. "Ikai-chan." Uryu threw herself at him and he caught her like she was a cat, which technically was true. She kissed him on the cheek and took her position on him again like usual. "I've missed you," she said as she rubbed her cheek with his. Yeah, anything new from Soul Society?" He had given them the apology letters and letters of pardon from the old man. They were asked if they'd return back to Soul Society, something they turned down on spot. He had offered the Visoreds to join his squad. When they had rejected, he had told them of its superiority over other squads and the fact that they'd be treated with respect of a captain or more. Even their pay would be more than the captain's. They wanted some time to answer when he had put the final nail into the coffin, saying that as a member of Squad 0, he had banished Central 46 with the permission of the Soul King, and he, along with the captain commander, would be making all the decisions Central 46 would have made. As a result, he would have too much in his hands, resulting in him being sick often. He was grateful that the next week they'd agreed to join his squad, but told him that it was only for his sake and to make sure he didn't get too stressed. Family was important to them after all. Uryu pouted and said, "Other than Soifon having a heart attack and the SWA jumping in joy about the two of us, nothing. Oh, and your squad barracks will take roughly 2 weeks to be completed." Yes, the two had started dating a week and a half after his return, when he'd accidentally stumbled into a drunk Uryu complaining to a badly bruised up Kisuke about him rejecting and ignoring her advances on him. She was actually crying even though she was drunk to the core. He had noticed in that time period after his return that she'd been hanging around him more often than not and made advances that one would make on their love interests. He'd brushed it off as her being playful again, and that's where he was wrong. The sight of a crying and drunk Yoruichi was too much for him, so he had hugged her and told her about his ignored attraction towards her. That had sobered her up. He then told her that if she didn't mind, then he'd like to give their relationship a shot to see how far it went. She was so happy that if it weren't for his instant regenerative powers of a hollow, he'd have had multiple ribs broken from the force of her hug. Her hug was so ridiculously tight that even his blood vein had strained to the max. And honestly speaking, he seemed to fall for the woman with each passing day. That woman's going to kill me the next time I return there. Ichigo sighed and asked, have you decided whether you'll return there with me or not? Yoruichi took a thinking pose despite hanging on his back and said, well, I'd like to, but the clan elders would force me into marriage and Yushiro wanted to see you as well. Ichigo raised his eyebrow and asked, you want my clan elders to approach yours and get us married, don't you? All he got was a cheeky grin. Ha, so troublesome. Life isn't easy either, Ichigo, so consider yourself lucky that you have Yoruichi-san to be by your side with every step that you take. And who knows, she could always act as your advisor and counselor besides the role of a lover or wife. Kisuke said as he dusted himself and sat on the ground beside the two, leaving them to wonder when the man had freed himself. Oi, get back here, you creepy shopkeeper. We aren't done roasting you. Apache roared from her position as she along with Mealer Rose was tied in Sajo Sabaku. Tia and Sung-sun hadn't done anything, knowing that what the shopkeeper had done wasn't to hurt them, rather to escape from their clutches. Ichigo groaned and asked, what did you do now? I'm hurt. Kisuke replied, putting a hand over his heart with a shocked expression on his face, resulting in him getting punched in the face along with my hat. His hat was blown off by a weak shikaho in point-blank range. He found his blown-off hat crumbling to dust and sighed as he pulled out another hat and bowed to the hat turned dust. Rest in peace, my friend, he said solemnly, even though the same damned hat was in his hands, causing Yoruichi's and Ichigo's eyebrows to twitch. Tia approached the couple and said, apparently the three of them were getting along with each other and things had gone downhill, or if you'd prefer uphill, after Shihoin-san joined the three. And you watched. It was entertaining to say the least. Tia and her Fraxian were given Ryatsu suppressing gigis along with soul candies so that they could explore the human world without raising suspicions from the Soul Society. Are you willing to have the spar now? Tia asked Ichigo and got an incredulous look from Yoruichi, to which she rose an eyebrow. Trust me when I say only a select few can get him to release his Shikai or Resurreccion. And you'd only be downtrodden in the end. Then that's all the more reason to test myself against him. War is coming, and since I've taken your side and thanks to Ichigo here I was able to become half hollow and half Shinigami instead of an Arrancar, so I also need to get stronger to properly utilize my now improved powers. Yoruichi had heard from Kisuke what had happened the previous day when she returned and found the four resting. And like the perverted woman that she was, she immediately licked her lips and rubbed her thighs, imagining the orgy she could have with Ichigo and the four Arrancars. The couple nodded and asked her to follow them down to the basement to start their spar. They'd decide her training schedule depending on how this spar went and how her powers work. Oh yeah, Yoruichi, make sure you buy Tia and the other three clothes to wear. Okay. He paled when he saw her Cheshire grin return full force on her face. I'll make alternate universe. University life with a live-in maid. Chapter 1. Ichigo groaned slightly in his bed as sunlight suddenly hit his eyes. Master, it's time to get up. A feminine voice came from his door. He ignored it and tried getting more of his precious sleep. The owner of the voice was a short, petite, long black-haired woman with purple eyes in a maid costume. Hurry up and wake up or I'll pull a prank on you again, okay? She said as she shook him. Are you okay with that? Getting no reply, she counted 3.2.1 and bit on his earlobe, instantly waking him up, but she didn't stop. She licked his earlobe and said, Master, your ear. It's so delicious. He was too surprised and weak to resist the pleasure, but was slowly building up energy to get rid of her, only to have her lick the insides of his ear. Does the insides of your ear feel good? Your reactions are so cute. He immediately shot straight up, dropping her on the ground. You, stop messing around. I'm awake. Kyle, you're hard, she said, further embarrassing the younger boy who was her master. She stood up and turned around, wiggling her butt in a suggestive manner, and said, Doesn't your lower half seem like it had awake for a long time? She said, pointedly looking at his groin as he tried to cover it up with his hands. Would you like me to help you with it before breakfast? Shut up, Ichigo exclaimed, trying in vain to suppress his morning wood and hide the blush, much to his maid's amusement. Sheesh, it's only morning and I'm already so tired, Ichigo said as he got ready to leave for university. Ichigo-chama, take care on your way out. She waved to his retreating figure with a blindingly genuine smile on her face. To think it had started a month ago. 1 month ago. Yeah, I've gotten used to university life. Ichigo replied to his father on phone as he reached his apartment. Hey, you're worried so you sent a maid. No, I don't need it. He stared in surprise as he opened the door to see a beautiful short woman dressed in maid costume making his bed. She is selfishly giving her a duplicate key and letting her in. Welcome home. I have already went and organized my luggage, she said with a somewhat nervous smile, feeling like she was caught red-handed. She then rummaged through her belongings and pulled out 2 pink objects. Sorry, this is sudden right after we met, but where should I leave my toys? The objects were a vibrator and its controller. Just what did you bring along with you? Ichigo exclaimed with a blush on his face as he leaned against the doorframe. I'm used to doing housework. I can even wash your underwear. I would be fine if you left my underwear alone. He deadpanned. You must be worried about what happened to the bed, she said as she stood beside him. What are you talking about? Now that he looked at it, it seemed to shine a bit. I have already replaced the bed sheets I have used earlier with clean sheets. She stared, pointing with her hand at the shining bed. Just what did you use it for? Pardon my late greeting. Your father has hired me as a live-in here, she said, sitting on the opposite side of him. The live-in part will be put on hold though. It's because I'm too cute so you can't help but attack me, right? She asked bashfully with a hand on her cheek. Oi, it's the other way around. Should I prepare the bed and change it into a double? She said, patting the bed. His apartment was rather small. A single room with attached bathroom and small kitchen with a dining table for 2 besides his study table. I really cannot care what you do with the bed, he exclaimed as he looked at double bed which replaced his previous single one. But what happened to my own bed? Completely ignoring his question, she said, you can also treat my maid costumes as a play, so it's totally fine. Just what in the world is totally fine? He asked, horrified at the implications. By the way, maid-san, just how old are you? I'm 22. The name is Rukia, by the way, she said, surprising him. You're 4 years older than me, aren't you getting old? ... It seems you don't know the joy having a maid older than you, she said darkly as she suddenly pulled something out from under her skirt, freaking him out. Let me show you the ability of a well-experienced person, she said as she lounged at him. Wait, oi, don't touch. And as such his life with this perverted maid had begun.